Thank you for joining my presentation. Allow me to share where I'm coming from. I'm a cardiologist and cardiac electrophysiologist specializing in heart rhythm disorders. After more than 10 years in full-time practice, I've come to realize that what my patients want more than anything else is to have more energy. I work in a wonderful specialty that offers very high-tech solutions, which are transformative for the appropriate patient. Whether our treatments are simple or sophisticated, our patients measure their success in terms of their energy levels. Do they have more energy or not? And it still amazes me how our patients pick this word energy to describe what they want. This was true prior to COVID and is particularly true in the COVID-19 era, where so many individuals recovering from COVID-19 are experiencing prolonged periods of debilitating fatigue. So my patients have given me this energy mandate. I'm here to help, and so I take this longing for greater levels of energy very seriously. This is a large topic that must consider both the physical and metaphysical aspects of the human condition, and it all needs to be covered in one setting. I've tried to be sufficiently comprehensive while making this material as interesting as possible. Here is a necessary disclaimer. Let's remember that this presentation is for informational purposes only. Dr. James Kneller and James Kneller, MD, LLC are not responsible for how you may use this information. Please consult with your personal physician prior to a change in health practice or when starting a new therapy. That said, I believe you will find this material very interesting and helpful. Please follow me on social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm at James Kneller, MD across all platforms, and my website is www.jamesknellermd.com. We would love to have you in our extended family. Your feedback and stories of success are greatly appreciated. One thing that first attracted me to the medical profession, and what keeps me hooked, is our ability to understand and address medical problems at a molecular level if needed. Even with that ability, it's important to consider everything from a whole person perspective, thinking through the impact of any therapy in light of our patient's broader medical profile, social needs, and personal health goals. We focus in to exercise the power of modern medicine and then step back to stay oriented in terms of meaningfulness. To do this, it helps me to think in terms of a whole person energy ladder. My wish is for everyone to become a self-actualized, engaged human being inspired by life and operating from a place of gratitude and abundance. Optimal health is foundational for a fulfilling and productive life, so I'm interested in optimizing health at every level. When patients come to me or are referred to me, it is usually for a specific medical problem, which is cardiac in nature, and for electrical disorders of the heart in particular. And in the context of a doctor-patient relationship, my professional obligation with the patient is to apply the standard of care as best I can. And throughout, as a fiduciary, I always have the whole person health ladder or energy ladder in mind and seek for everyone to move up the ladder towards becoming a fully functional and self-actualized human being. For the physician, our highest professional reward is patient satisfaction. The practice of medicine can be a major headache, but those moments of healing and appreciation affirm that this is a most noble pursuit. For me, the gratitude moments often occur at the first follow-up visit after one of our procedures. You open the door and enter the exam room and see your patient for the first time since their procedure. And the patient says, "Wow, I feel so much better. I'm getting my energy back." It reminds me of the New Testament story of the 10 lepers. Recall that Jesus has healed 10 individuals with leprosy, and they run off thrilled with their new lease on life. And then one of the healed lepers comes running back to say thank you. In response, Jesus famously asks, "Were there not 10 lepers cleansed? Where are the other 9? From the perspective of a healer, I can understand that response in two ways. Jesus may be asking why the other 9 lepers forgot to say thank you, or Jesus could be scolding this one leper who came back for wasting precious time. What are you doing back here? Get out there with the other 9 and enjoy your newly restored health. Here is the lesson. How do you really express thank you to your doctor? by actually enjoying your new quality of life. Don't waste any of it. One more insight from the physician perspective, it's the parable of the lost sheep. The shepherd cares for 100 sheep, but when one is lost, he leaves the 99 to go out and find that one lost sheep. The priority is the lost sheep. Likewise, I can assure you that your doctor doesn't lay awake at night thinking about all the people who said thank you today. He or she is thinking about the patient who isn't getting better, didn't get a good result, hasn't responded to treatment, or is still a diagnostic dilemma. Like the parable, it's not about the 99 success stories. The priority is the one that needs help. Here's a cartoon from the New Yorker. The patient is in the doctor's office and he is just radiant. And the old-time doc is not happy about this. So his question is accusatory. You've been fooling around with alternative medicines, haven't you? Understand that your board-certified physician is obligated to practice evidence-based medicine within certain practice guidelines. In that role, we have very little room to recommend alternate therapies. However, we also recognize that there is a lot we don't know, and there are a lot of products out there that are good for us, but that will never receive rigorous scientific evaluation, and therefore will never be recognized as evidence-based. This is because financial resources or the incentive to perform the large clinical trials is lacking. However, we are all free to use our best judgment and try different things if we want to. And studies show that doctors use far more health supplements than their patients do. It's just that doctors won't recommend their own health practices to their patients, and that's partly to avoid liability. So we doctors are experimenting with our health, we just aren't advising you to do the same. Let's review what we know about human energy, from its molecular origins at the cellular level to the organization and flow of energy across our organ systems and throughout our bodies. Specialized structures known as mitochondria are the little factories producing energy within our cells. The body is composed of 50 trillion cells, with each cell containing 200 to 300 mitochondria. That's 10,000 trillion mitochondria producing energy for your body. The mitochondria produce a molecule called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is our cellular energy currency. Each ATP molecule includes 3 high-energy phosphate bonds, and energy is released when these high-energy bonds are broken. Unfortunately, we have an astonishingly low reserve of ATP, so we are continuously recycling our ATP. Molecular bonds within ATP are constantly being broken as an act of combustion and then recharged. For example, the heart contains 700 milligrams of ATP, which is enough energy for the heart to beat once per second, that's 60 beats per minute, for only 10 seconds. Clearly, our available ATP is depleted quite rapidly. This means that ATP is being recycled 1,000 to 1,500 times per day. The average person possesses only 50 to 100 grams of ATP, but expends their body weight in ATP daily. Interestingly, there are 4 key substrates that directly support mitochondrial function. These are available in our diets and can also be taken as supplements. Dr. Stephen Sinatra, metabolic cardiologist, has called these the awesome foursome of metabolic cardiology. Nutrients belonging to the awesome foursome include coenzyme Q10, L-Carnitine, D-ribose, and magnesium, all of which support mitochondrial function in different ways. Given the limitations of our modern diet, we are prone to deficiencies. Maintaining adequate levels of these substrates is important for achieving optimal levels of energy. For example, D-ribose is a structural sugar forming the backbone of the ATP molecule. Only trace amounts of D-ribose are available through our diet, and we are reliant on a slow and very inefficient biosynthetic process to manufacture D-ribose. This becomes a rate-limiting process during times of stress and increased demand for ATP. Supplementing with D-ribose helps to rebuild and maintain our ATP reserves, allowing our energy to bounce back after times of stress or heavy exertion. Many of us are also magnesium deficient. Even when magnesium levels in our blood are within the normal range, we can still have profound intracellular deficiencies in magnesium. This is because extracellular magnesium in the bloodstream is maintained at the expense of intracellular magnesium, where it is needed for most mitochondrial function. Supplementing with a natural form of magnesium is often necessary to replete intracellular stores, which is good practice for almost everyone. Coenzyme Q10 is likely the best known member of the awesome foursome. Coenzyme Q10 deficiencies occur in various disease states and also due to statin medications, which so many individuals require as treatment for high cholesterol. Supplementing with coenzyme Q10 can be helpful for everyone and particularly helpful for statin users. L-Carnitine is an amino acid that is concentrated in red meat and plays a special role in supporting muscle and mitochondrial function. My own health regimen includes a teaspoon of D-ribose, which is 5 to 10 grams on a daily basis. I also take about 200 milligrams of magnesium daily, derived naturally from marine salts and taken as a capsule. I'm also taking 200 milligrams of coenzyme Q10 daily, and being a vegetarian, I worry that I'm not getting enough L-carnitine in my diet, and my energy regimen includes 500 to 1,000 milligrams of L-carnitine daily. Understanding mitochondria, which is the basis of cellular energy production within each of our 50 trillion cells, we can now consider the organization and flow of energy systems within the body. Just as we want healthy and effective mitochondria, we also need these larger energy systems to be as robust and unobstructed as possible. The Hindu religion is well known for describing a system of 7 energy chakras. These are arranged in linear fashion along the spine from sacrum to crown. We now know that there is an anatomic basis to the chakra system. Without the religious association, we can appreciate the objective reality of these structures and how energy is organized within the body. On the left, we see the system of chakras as they are traditionally described, 1 through 7, ascending from the root chakra at the base of the spine up to the crown chakra at the top of the head. On the right, we see an anatomic diagram by Dr. Joe Dispenza, which makes the point that each of the 7 energy centers corresponds to the combination of a major nerve plexus and major gland. In ascending order, we have the inferior mesenteric nerve plexus and sex glands corresponding to the first or root chakra. Next, the superior mesenteric nerve plexus and digestive glands, including the pancreas, corresponding to the second chakra. Next, the solar and celiac plexus and adrenal glands corresponding to the third chakra. Next is the nerve plexus of the heart and thymus gland corresponding to the fourth chakra. Then the thyroid nerve plexus and thyroid gland corresponding to the fifth chakra. And next, the pineal nerve plexus and pineal gland corresponding to the sixth chakra. And finally, the pituitary nerve plexus and pituitary gland corresponding to the seventh or crown chakra. A nerve plexus is a hub of nervous activity whose function is largely autonomous that governs many bodily functions locally. Decisions are made within the plexus based on the information flowing into that center and response formation occurring at the local level. Activity in each nerve plexus may be modulated to varying degrees by neighboring centers and by the brain. However, control is largely local. A major action of each nerve plexus is control of a major gland, which releases hormones into the bloodstream. There's a reason why each gland occurs at its particular anatomic position. The released hormones activate cellular receptors locally, but also have effects throughout the body. Hormonal action at a distance will influence the feedback received from other centers, which will fine-tune additional release of that hormone. So we can appreciate the complex interplay between energy centers and the tremendous value of synergy. We can also appreciate the havoc that may result from an imbalance. And this is how these structures would appear in a medical textbook. There is nervous outflow from the spinal column, which is the central nervous system, to each of the nerve plexi that we have named, with subsequent outflow to the corresponding organ or gland. Like the brain, each nerve plexi maintains a library of pre-encoded neuronal programs which are selectively activated in reaction to various stimuli, allowing for a complex but stereotyped local response. In this way, each nerve plexus functions like a mini-brain, an independent level of mind within the body. It's an accessory mind that thinks independently from the brain. The reality of these independent levels of mind may best be appreciated from the field of organ transplant, where we observe traits from those who donate their organs, such as personality features, preferences, and tendencies, manifesting in the individuals who receive those organs. Knowing that personality traits may accompany an organ that is literally removed from one person and implanted into another person, we can begin to appreciate how our own personhood is reproduced and enshrined outside of our brains. Who we are is deeply ingrained within our tissues, with every fiber of our being accounting for who we truly are. This effect is greatest for our largest and most electrically dense organs, such as the heart, but arises from the resonant energy of each and every cell. So we can characterize each level of mind further. The lower three centers are primarily involved in energy. The middle two centers mediate both energy and information. The highest two centers are purely informational. Now, let's discuss how our awareness of this organizational hierarchy can help us improve our own experience of personal energy. To begin, let's characterize these 7 energy centers in more detail. The lowest energy center, which is primarily energetic and concerned with our survival, is associated with the sex organs, testes in males and ovaries in females, and sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. These hormones govern more than sexual functions, having major actions in your bones, brain, and blood vessels. This center governs reproduction, procreation, elimination, sexuality, and sex identity. But the testes and ovaries also secrete oxytocin. This detail is often forgotten since the posterior pituitary gland, which corresponds to the 7th energy center, is our major source of oxytocin. Recall that oxytocin is known as the love hormone since it is released with physical contact and promotes bonding between individuals. While even a simple handshake can trigger the release of oxytocin, oxytocin is powerfully released during orgasm in both men and women. Interestingly, testicular production of oxytocin requires an exogenous source of vitamin C, and oxytocin receptors throughout the body require adequate magnesium and cholesterol for optimal function. Vitamin C and magnesium aren't especially known for their roles in sexual health. However, without magnesium and adequate levels of cholesterol, feelings of love and social attachment will be compromised. The gland making up the 2nd energy center is the pancreas. This center is primarily energetic and concerned with our survival. The main pancreatic hormones include insulin and glucagon, which regulates the level of glucose in the blood. The 2nd energy center governs conversion of food into energy, along with consumption, digestion, and elimination. The 3rd center involves the adrenal glands. This center is also primarily energetic and concerned with our survival. The adrenal glands release the hormones of stress, adrenaline, and cortisol. This center governs the will, power, self-importance, control, drive, aggression, and dominance. The 4th energy center involves the thymus gland, which is responsible for over 1,000 chemicals contributing to immunity, growth, repair, and regeneration. This is the first center mediating the conversion of energy from the lower centers into information. The thymus gland releases thymosin, somatomedin, and thymopoietin. Thymosin is particularly active in children, stimulating the pituitary to release growth hormone. Ways of sustaining this activity during adulthood is an area of active investigation. Thymopoietin stimulates production of T cells to boost immunity and fight cancer. A little-known fact is that the thymus also produces small amounts of melatonin, thereby contributing to the sleep-wake cycle. The pineal gland, or 6th energy center, is primarily responsible for melatonin, which is released from the blood-brain barrier and primarily affects the central nervous system. The thymus, on the other hand, is located outside the restrictive blood-brain barrier, and melatonin from the thymus is available to peripheral melatonin receptors, which are widely distributed, being found in the heart and blood vessels, lungs, intestines, kidneys, liver, muscle, and brown fat tissue. Direct action at these locations is important for the sleep state. It should be noted that melatonin, taken as a supplement, fails to enter the blood-brain barrier and only reaches these peripheral receptor sites. For this reason, supplemental melatonin cannot reproduce the actions of melatonin from the pineal gland. We also know that the psychedelic metabolite of melatonin, dimethyltryptamine, commonly known as DMT, which is most concentrated in the pineal gland and visual cortex of the brain, is also found in the peripheral blood. DMT in the peripheral blood is likely derived from melatonin arising from the thymus, with peripheral actions likely contributing to the cataleptic states of DMT-mediated psychedelic experience. The fourth center is considered the seat of the soul, where our nobility and divine expression originate. As such, the fourth energy center governs love, caring, nurturing, compassion, gratitude, appreciation, kindness, inspiration, selflessness, wholeness, and trust. The fifth center involves the thyroid and parathyroid glands. The major hormones released by the thyroid gland include triiodothyronine, or T3, and thyroxine, or T4, which are produced from iodine. The thyroid controls the metabolic rate, or speed at which the body's chemical processes occur. To increase the metabolic rate, thyroid hormone stimulates almost every tissue in the body to manufacture proteins, which requires an increase in cellular oxygen consumption and energy expenditure. Increases in heart rate, heat production, growth, skin maintenance, fertility, and digestion burns more calories. The fifth center is closely connected to the seventh center through the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. Low levels of thyroid hormone are sensed by the hypothalamus, which then directs the anterior pituitary to stimulate the thyroid to release more thyroid hormone. This multi-loop feedback system is found in virtually all higher vertebrates and is indispensable for growth, differentiation, reproduction, and intelligence. The fifth center governs the expression of love felt in the fourth center. The fifth center empowers your reality through language, sharing your thoughts and feelings, and voicing your present truth. The sixth energy center involves the pineal gland, which is sometimes called the third eye. Unlike lower centers, the sixth energy center is only concerned with information. Melatonin is often considered the only hormone produced by the pineal gland, although the pineal peptide known as epithalamin is also important. Melatonin governs the sleep-wake cycle or circadian rhythm, while chemical derivatives of melatonin, such as dimethyltryptamine or DMT, is a powerful endogenous psychedelic. Under ordinary conditions, DMT likely nuances our experience of reality, which is rationality embedded in a dream. Under circumstances of increased pineal activity, the psychoactive properties of DMT bring us mystical or transcendental or even frankly psychedelic experiences. Epithalamin increases the production of telomerase, an enzyme that lengthens telomeres. Recall that telomeres are located at the tips of DNA strands, preserving the integrity of DNA and allowing for ongoing cell division and growth. By producing epithalamin, the pineal gland exerts a powerful anti-aging effect, attempting to answer the universal human desire for immortality. Production of melatonin and epithalamin decline with age, which likely contributes to the unrelenting insomnia experienced by the elderly. Production of melatonin may eventually cease altogether, resulting in death. Maintaining pineal health is clearly important. The synthetic form of epithalamin is called epitolon. By extending the duration of cellular replication, epitolon directly opposes cellular aging and is considered the fountain of youth peptide. Epitolon has been shown to increase lifespan, restore reproductive function, prevent age-related diseases, boost energy levels, promote deeper sleep, heal deteriorated muscle, and improve skin health and appearances. Beyond conventional hormone mechanisms, the pineal gland contains a visual apparatus consisting of rods and cones similar to a conventional eye, allowing it to literally see certain wavelengths of light, particularly blue-green light with wavelength in the 470 nanometer range. Flashes of blue-green light likely occur during the production and metabolism of melatonin, stimulating a visual response within the pineal gland. This provides an additional mechanism for melatonin to capture sensory information, adding to our experience of reality. And finally, the pineal gland contains calcite crystals with piezoelectric properties, which are excitable by electromagnetic frequencies and field energy outside the range of visible light. This allows the pineal gland to act as a cosmic antenna, receiving subtle information signals that we are actually immersed in, but otherwise unaware. This additional information and its contribution to our perception of reality would otherwise be unavailable through our five senses. The seventh and highest energy center involves the pituitary gland, which represents a master gland that governs a downward cascade to lower glands. Hormones released from the pituitary gland are actually synthesized in the hypothalamus of the brain. Hormones from the anterior pituitary are secreted into the circulation moments after being released, whereas hormones from the posterior pituitary are stored in secretory granules until it's time for their appropriate release. The anterior pituitary gland produces 6 major hormones. The first is growth hormone, which stimulates growth and cellular regeneration throughout the body. The next is thyroid stimulating hormone, and the third is adrenocorticotropic hormone, which directly controls the thyroid and adrenal glands associated with energy centers 5 and 3, respectively. The final 3 hormones of the anterior pituitary control sexual function at the level of the first energy center. The first is luteinizing hormone, or LH, and next is follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, and finally prolactin. Prolactin has long been associated with uterine contractions and breast milk production in women. It's also responsible for sexual gratification post-orgasm in males. The posterior pituitary, also part of the seventh center, secretes only 2 hormones, vasopressin, which is also known as antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin. Vasopressin controls water balance via the kidneys and controls vascular tone. The hypothalamus is located outside the blood-brain barrier and therefore can directly measure the concentration of the peripheral blood. When the blood is too thick, vasopressin is released, which stimulates the kidneys to prevent water loss in the urine. Vasopressin also contributes to the sleep-wake cycle, which is otherwise governed by the 6th center. Recall that oxytocin is known as the love hormone, since it is released with physical contact and promotes bonding between individuals. Even a simple handshake can trigger release of oxytocin. Oxytocin is even released by petting animals, which is one of the benefits of having pets. Oxytocin is powerfully released during orgasm in both men and women. Oxytocin is often considered a maternal hormone since large amounts are released during childbirth and help initiate lactation. Interestingly, testicular production of oxytocin requires an exogenous source of vitamin C, and oxytocin receptors throughout the body require adequate magnesium and cholesterol for optimal function. Without magnesium and cholesterol, feelings of love and social attachment will be disappointing. The 7th energy center is purely informational, involved in expressions of nobility and our divine nature and our highest consciousness. The 7th energy center is most concerned with balance and promoting harmony with all things. Clearly, the hormonal systems are challenging to summarize. However, we can begin to appreciate the complexity with each hormone playing both major and minor roles. Through hormone release, each energy center exerts local control, but also has influence throughout the body, for which it receives feedback from other centers. So far, we've discussed the organization and interactions of the major energy centers within our bodies. However, there are also interactions with energy fields arising outside the body. The most obvious is electromagnetic, but also quantum fields, which likely influence individual nerve plexi, since biological systems can be exquisitely sensitive to very weak signals. Consistent with the reality of these external interactions, each chakra is conceptualized as a cone-shaped structure. There is one for each nerve plexus, representing the ability of that chakra to exchange information with the environment, both receiving and emitting. In particular, each nerve plexi may be influenced by the electromagnetic field energy emanating from the people around us, and from the quantum hologram in which we are immersed. These interactions provide a mechanism for how those around us can perturb our internal states, both positively and negatively, and how we may be influenced by non-local sources of information. Realizing that we are immersed in quantum energy fields, let's discuss the electromagnetic energy that arises from the human body. This field energy is all-encompassing with the potential to influence every biological system in our surroundings. The energy field arises from the flow of electric current within the body. Current density is greatest within the heart, which is 5,000 times stronger electrically than the brain. Each heartbeat begins with a massive flux of electrically charged particles, which is predominantly sodium ions, with this current flow producing an electromagnetic field that surrounds us, strongest across a 3 to 4 foot radius, but measurable up to 10 feet away. And as the figure indicates, there is a smaller field closer to the core arising from the movement of cerebral spinal fluid, or CSF, along the spinal column and around the brain. That fluid is composed of electrically charged proteins with fluid motion creating an electric current and corresponding energy field. The electrophysiologic processes in our bodies produce a pulsating electromagnetic field that surrounds us. This field energy arises from your beating heart, but will also change depending on your thoughts and emotions. It's an energetic aura that affects our own physiology while influencing those around us, shaping the experience of everyone involved. Your presence, your field energy, changes current flow within the hearts and minds of those around you, changing the shape of their energy field and thus modulating their conscious experience of reality. And this is merely a manifestation of Faraday's law, which tells us that a changing electromagnetic field will produce current flow. This is how your pulsating field energy may energetically affect the flow of electrical current within the electrically active organs of those around you, such as the heart and brain. Presently, we can only speculate on the degree to which these subtle influences may affect the thoughts, feelings, perceptions, or attitudes of those close by. Knowing that your inner state plays a significant role, learn to monitor and curate the quality of your thoughts and emotions. We know that the energy continuum extends far beyond what we are aware of, which is the relatively narrow spectrum of visible light. Even if unseen, we are sensitive to these energy fields, which influence our physiology and therefore our experience of reality. We can therefore conceptualize our energy centers as energy informational routers, mediating an exchange of energy and information, not only with our bodies, but with the outer environment. While the effects of our presence can be measured locally, the reach of our influence into the surrounding universe is presently unknown. The extent to which our energy centers function as independent levels of mind within the body is revealed through the field of organ transplant. This is particularly true of heart transplant, given the massive electrical capacity of heart muscle and the dense neurologic connections between the heart and brain. Your identity, personality traits, preferences, and tendencies are reproduced in your heart. This information is so ingrained that it may manifest when a person's heart is literally removed and transplanted into another person's body. Heart transplantation is performed for individuals with end-stage heart disease for whom there are no other effective therapies. Each transplant requires a donor, a living heart from another person. It's an anonymous gift. The new heart must come from someone who has been declared brain dead, which is usually the result of a head injury from a car accident, gunshot wound, or major bleed into the brain, like a stroke. If the individual has consented to organ donation, a transplant database is then used to perform a nationwide search identifying a suitable match. The chest of the brain-dead organ donor is then opened, exposing the heart, which is carefully removed. The major vessels that attach the heart to the body are simply cut at the midpoint, and the heart is placed in a refrigerated container that looks a lot like a cooler. However, this is no picnic. The heart is then immediately transported, usually by airline or helicopter, to the location of the recipient where the transplant operation will be performed. And the clock is running. The total time that the heart is outside of the body needs to be as short as possible. And when the heart arrives, the patient receiving the heart is already in the operating room, and the surgical team is ready to go. On the operating table, the patient is transitioned to cardiopulmonary bypass, meaning a heart-lung machine, also known as the pump, takes over the function of the heart and lungs. Now the heart isn't needed to sustain life, meaning it can be completely removed from the body. So the patient's chest is opened wide and the surgical team removes the diseased heart, cutting the diseased organ from its major attachment sites, and immediately begins to implant the donor heart. This step takes 6 to 10 hours, depending. The new heart is placed in the chest and carefully sutured into place. As the diagram illustrates, the major blood vessels are reattached. Two veins, superior and inferior vena cava, and two major arteries, pulmonary artery and aorta, with the entire posterior left atrial wall then being attached, which contains all four pulmonary veins. And voila! The patient is transitioned off cardiopulmonary bypass and the new heart is allowed to take over. Recovery from a heart transplant operation is typically rapid. Here we have a heart transplant recipient, Lisa Sahlberg, being presented with her diseased heart following her transplant operation. Here's another example of a young transplant recipient holding his diseased heart after its removal during his transplant operation. Many heart transplant patients lead normal lives for decades post-transplant. However, this is not always the case. This patient unfortunately passed away from complications arising from his transplant procedure. We respect that organ transplant remains a particularly challenging area of medicine. The condition of those awaiting transplant is often critical, and the courage required to face the procedure and life following transplant is extraordinary. The experience of Kevin Mashford, a heart transplant recipient, illustrates how the personal passion of an organ donor can be transferred to the recipient, becoming a dominant motivating force in their life post-transplant. Kevin had no interest in cycling. He then received the heart of a dedicated cyclist who died in a cycling accident. Post-transplant, Kevin discovered a passion for cycling, which was brought to him by the donor heart. Bill Wall was a top executive with no interest in exercise. In 2000, Bill received the heart of Brady Michaels, a Hollywood stuntman who died in a freak accident. Bill then became a competitive athlete, winning numerous medals. A few weeks after the operation, he heard a radio song by British music star Sade, an artist he had no knowledge of otherwise. The song made Bill burst into tears. The donor family later confirmed that Brady Michaels was a huge fan of Sade. Bill's intense emotional reaction to the song arose from the heart of Brady Michaels. Such cases allow us to recognize how dominant traits are contained in our tissues and organs, particularly the heart, and these are so deeply ingrained that they may be bestowed upon the recipient of our organs. This is true of any organ transplant, including lungs, kidney, liver, even retina. These insights allow us to appreciate the dominant role of our hearts and other organs in the expression of who we are, and by extension, the importance of our major centers of energy. A dramatic example is the story of Claire Sylvia. At age 47, Sylvia received a heart and lung transplant from an 18-year-old boy killed in a motorcycle accident. Sylvia awoke from the transplant operation craving beer, which she had never wanted previously, and she had a new strange taste for other foods, Snickers bars and Kentucky Fried Chicken takeaway. In the weeks to follow, Claire found that she was more aggressive and assertive than before the transplant and felt more confident as well. She felt tougher and fitter and stopped getting colds. Even her walk became more manly. She felt a new power that she associated with strength and vibrancy. She noted that her timid side had fallen away. She didn't feel the same need to have a boyfriend. The donor appeared to her in a dream. He gave her his name. He was Tim Lamarand, and they promised never to be separated. Using the information she received from Tim's heart, Sylvia looked up his family and they met. Tim's mother confirmed his assertiveness and confidence, as well as his taste for beer, Snickers bar, and KFC. Sylvia lived for 22 more years and passed away at age 69. This dramatic example illustrates how dominant traits and preferences are deeply encoded in the heart and strong enough to manifest in another person following transplant. Knowing this, we can appreciate the dominant role of our hearts in our own bodies and the powerful influence of our other centers of energy and how this information may project within our energetic aura. Another case, an 8-year-old girl received the heart of a 10-year-old female murder victim. The girl started having dramatic postoperative nightmares about the murder of another young girl. Her psychiatrist perceived the dreams to be genuine memories from the donor. The detail in the dreams was so accurate that the murderer was identified and arrested. In this dramatic case, the heart retains critical information of great significance and is able to communicate that information to its new host, who seems to be perceived as friend rather than foe and caring deeply for the well-being of the new heart. This transplant stuff can take strange twists. At age 57, Sonny Graham received the heart of a 33-year-old man who committed suicide. In a strange twist, Graham began to take on some of the preferences of the man whose heart now beat in his chest. The donor loved beer and hot dogs, and after the operation, so did Graham. Acquaintances noted that Graham seemed suddenly restless as well. Thankful for the new heart, Graham began writing letters to the donor's family to express his gratitude. In January 1997, Graham met the donor's widow, Cheryl Cottle, then age 28. I felt like I had known her for years, Graham recalls. I couldn't keep my eyes off her. I just stared. They were married in 2004. 12 years after the transplant operation, Graham died in the same way the donor did, with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. We can only speculate how the love attraction and suicidal tendencies of the original donor shaped the destiny of Sonny Graham. There are hundreds of cases of transplant recipients developing the tastes and traits of their donors. This phenomena has been attributed to cellular memory. This is especially strong in the case of heart transplant because cardiac myocytes, the heart cells, possess the strongest electrical polarity. The 7 energy centers are conceptualized as having ascending frequencies. The lowest energy centers have the lowest frequencies, with the higher or faster frequencies as you move up to the higher centers. We often hear that we must raise our rate of vibration in order to become high functioning or more productive. Living out of the higher centers requires a higher rate of vibration. This is how we move past the limitations of the lower centers, such as unhealthy sexual tendencies and self-limiting emotions. The figure on the left illustrates the concept of energy getting stuck in lower centers, which tend to consume large amounts of our energy. Energy that is stuck in the first center may give symptoms of sexual depravity, sexual addiction, or anxiety over sexual trauma. When energy is stuck in the second center, symptoms include unhealthy guilt, shame, pain, unworthiness, lack, victimization. When our vibration can't rise above the third center, there is excessive competition, need for control, impatience, ego, and boasting. And there are certain highly productive individuals who achieve great material success by drawing heavily on the first 3 centers, motivated by a motto of production and progress at all costs, and satisfied by the accumulation of material reward. To be a fully functioning human being, it's advisable to pull our energy reserves up out of the lower centers, adding energy to our higher centers, thereby achieving an appropriate balance of energy across all centers. In words that speak to our need to incorporate both higher and lower energy centers, Jesus told us that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word. Bread is food energy, caloric energy, which is managed by the lower centers. Word is information, which is operative in the higher centers. Jesus' teachings are far more than just good advice. Jesus taught with the intent to communicate fundamental truths about the nature of reality. So how are we sustained by information? For many, life would be unlivable without its nuances. An example of this is the need for creative individuals to be engaged in the creative process, without which they will wither and die. Eating food isn't enough, and the creative process often occurs during non-ordinary states of consciousness. In the act of creation, you don't always know what you are doing. A central animating spirit is working through you. And remember that the word animate means possessed by a spirit. In this case, it's information from a benevolent spirit uttering truth. And the creative process, as we've described, has given us the great works of literature, art, and scientific discoveries. So we don't live by bread alone, but by every word. The lower 3 centers are Newtonian in nature, governed by the rules of push and pull, cause and effect, equal and opposite. The higher centers are more quantum in nature, where phenomena becomes nonlinear. Things occur along hyperbolic scales. This is where wave-particle duality, entanglement, and the holographic nature of our universe and other quantum phenomena are to be expected. We've discussed the anatomic basis of our 7 centers of energy, using the 4th center and heart transplant to illustrate how powerful these centers may be, playing unique roles that go beyond their apparent major purpose. We've examined the organization of energy within our bodies, watching for ways to enhance our own experience of energy. Going forward, let's focus on the special role of the 6th energy center, which contains the pineal gland, sometimes called the third eye, both in religious symbolism and anatomically. We'll see that certain reptiles display an external, invisible third eye in the center of their foreheads. The equivalent structure in mammals and humans is the pineal gland, which is fully intracranial. So let's dive into the anatomy and function of the pineal gland. Let's start by understanding how the pineal gland may literally serve as a third eye. We can answer that question by considering our animal friends, the reptiles, and those creatures classified as cold-blooded. Many reptiles possess an anatomic third eye, which is located in the middle of their foreheads, between and slightly above their 2 conventional eyes. Here we see 2 reptiles, each having a prominent third eye. It looks different from their conventional eyes, but is quite obviously an eye. This reptile third eye has genetics and embryology that are similar to mammalian paired eyes. It features a phototransduction apparatus complete with cornea, lens, and retina, having rods and cones. These contain photopigments that allow our eyes to see both black and white and in color. This reptilian third eye is directly photosensitive, but covered by a thick scale, and functions predominantly to differentiate between light and darkness. This third eye regulates skin color by influencing melatonin and the production of melanin, and provides a calendar by differentiating length of days and changing seasons. As we will see, the human pineal gland is our third eye equivalent structure. A third eye structure is common to a large variety of reptile species. Here are more examples with snakes, lizards, and other reptiles who clearly possess a third eye. A pineal foramen, which would support an externalized third eye, has even been found in dinosaur fossils. In humans and other mammals, the equivalent third eye structure is the pineal gland, which is a tiny pea-sized gland located in the center of the brain rather than the surface of the skull. These diagrams show the pineal gland in both sagittal and transverse planes. The human pineal gland is made of pineal cells, known as pinealocytes. These occupy 95% of the gland by volume. Pinealocytes are photoneuroendocrine cells able to transduce light, generate nerve impulses, and produce melatonin. Melatonin produced within the pineal gland controls our sleep-wake cycle. This is in response to changes in light as seen by our conventional eyes. The pineal gland is tightly regulated. As evidence of this, the pineal gland has the second highest blood flow after the kidneys and dense nerve innervation. If you want to know which anatomic structures are most important, look for structures with the greatest blood flow and nerve innervation. This is where the action is, and the pineal gland is unrivaled in this regard. The pineal gland is located deep within the cranial vault. It's pitch black in there. Nevertheless, the pineal gland is structured like an eye, with the capacity to literally see light. Membranes within pinealocytes function as a retina, containing rods with unique photopigments known as pinopsin and filled with a special vitreous fluid like a conventional eye. There are 3 sources of light within the pineal gland for the visual apparatus to see. Number 1 is protein photoluminescence, which arises from concentrated tryptophan, an amino acid substrate for melatonin production. Number 2 is piezoeluminescence, which is a property of calcite microcrystals and crystals of melatonin, DMT, and 5-MeO-DMT. Piezoeluminescence refers to light emission induced in certain solids by non-destructive dynamic pressure changes resulting in mechano-optical conversion, emitting photons of light. And number 3, the luminescent properties of calcite and melatonin crystals, which glow when excited by light from other sources. The pineal eye sees these flashes of light and glowing crystals, which represents another signaling mechanism that may convey important information. We will discuss these light sources in greater detail later. Finally, the specialized calcite crystals that are found within the pineal gland have piezoelectric properties, meaning that pressure changes or vibrations within the gland will excite those crystals, generating an electric spark that results in nerve stimulation. The piezoelectric activity of pineal calcite crystals represents another mechanism for signal reception, allowing the pineal gland to transduce information from energy fields outside the range of visible light. More about this later as well. The extraordinary ability of the mammalian pineal gland is demonstrated by the Weddell seal, which inhabits Antarctic ice fields off the southern coast of Australia. By 3 weeks of age, the baby Weddell seal must be able to navigate under massive sheets of ice, often in total darkness, where survival depends on the ability to localize small breathing holes that the seals have cut through the ice. But how do they localize the breathing holes? They can't rely on memory since they haven't visited these holes previously. The baby Weddell seal has a pineal gland that is 1/3 the size of the entire brain and 27 times larger than that of a human. Does the pineal gland account for their astonishing ability to navigate and survive? Is the pineal gland able to sense changes in vibration or field energy related to the presence of the breathing holes? In support of the pineal gland providing a sense of direction, calcification of the pineal gland has been found to explain a defective sense of direction. This study, published in the British Medical Journal in 1985, was motivated by the finding of heavy pineal gland calcification detected using lateral x-rays of the skull in several teenage boys who had recurrent trouble with getting lost. They studied 750 patients referred for lateral x-rays of the skull and identified pineal gland calcifications in 394 patients. Those with pineal calcification scored an average of only 3.7 out of 10 on tests of spatial orientation, compared with an average score of 7.6 in those without calcification. Similarly, passenger pigeons who began to get lost were found to have substantial pineal calcification, while those with preserved navigational abilities had no apparent calcification within the pineal gland. While the role of the pineal gland in our sense of direction and navigation is interesting, there are other sensory phenomena much more astounding that the pineal gland may provide for us. One example in particular is remote viewing. During the Cold War years, the US and Soviet Union are known to have been spying on each other using the services of psychic remote viewers, with the specific objective of gathering military intelligence information. In simple terms, remote viewing is the ability of human participants to acquire information about spatially remote geographical targets otherwise inaccessible by any known sensory means. On the US side, this CIA-sponsored program was known as Stargate. Remote viewing is now understood to consist of a set of techniques that anyone can use to tap into the patterns of information that surround us. At least several ancient civilizations were acquainted with this particular faculty of the human mind. Ancient writings from both India and China describe instances of clairvoyant skills used for obtaining military information. Interestingly, instructions for remote viewing detailed in the Yoga Sutras, written around 400 BC, are strikingly similar to the techniques used by the US viewers. One example from the Stargate program was a remote viewing of the planet Jupiter in 1972 before the upcoming NASA Pioneer 10 flyby. The viewer found a ring around Jupiter, but there was speculation that the viewer had actually seen Saturn instead. But when the Pioneer 10 flyby did take place, it confirmed the existence of rings around Jupiter. The documentary film Third Eye Spy gives further eyewitness accounts on the program. So how is remote viewing possible? The air around us seems empty, but you know that it is filled with electromagnetic information, cell phone signals, radio waves, TV signals, etc. So empty space can be filled with information, a vibrational resonance that fills space-time, and that is coming to you from a distance. When you have a receiver that is tuned to the frequency of those signals, you'll pick them up. All you need to do after that is to amplify the signals. Remote viewers don't necessarily amplify the signal of what they are viewing, but they have learned to reduce their own mental noise and to unlock communication between the conscious and subconscious minds. So what are the implications of remote viewing? First, you have abilities that you are probably not aware of. And secondly, there is a component of all of us that is non-local and connected to everything else in the universe. Classical science, rooted in a framework of direct local mechanistic causes and interactions, can't help us here. It's just too limited of a worldview. And even formal quantum mechanics doesn't allow for long-range information exchange for more than a few picoseconds between correlated particles. We may ask, what parts of our body are sensitive to the resonant frequencies occupying space-time, allowing us to be non-local and connected to the greater universe? The structures and biochemistry within the pineal gland are likely to provide this exquisite sensitivity and receptivity. Perhaps the most important thing that we can do to be fully human and to engage on a cosmic scale is to nurture the health and functionality of our pineal gland. The most obvious function of the pineal gland is governance of our sleep-wake cycle. During the day, when there is light, serotonin is produced within the pineal gland while conversion to melatonin is inhibited. Think of serotonin as your happiness hormone. At night, serotonin is converted to melatonin, about 2.5 milligrams per day, and melatonin mediates the sleep state. It is also known as a hypnagogue because transitions in and out of sleep represent states of hypnosis, times when your mind is incredibly receptive. Then, when the sun rises, the sleep period is over, and melatonin converts back to serotonin. This is the basic hormonal basis of the sleep-wake cycle. And we recognize that melatonin, whose major source is the pineal gland, has a plethora of functions throughout the body. Number one, sleep-wake cycles, where darkness signals the pineal gland to release melatonin, and this will control the timing of many other functions. Number two, there are melatonin receptors in the lungs, liver, adrenal glands, kidneys, intestine, and fat tissue. There is a melatonin response in all of these tissues that contributes to the sleep state. These are the targets of supplemental melatonin taken for sleep. And number three, melatonin inhibits the release of insulin from the pancreas. Number four, melatonin dilates and contracts blood vessels. Number five, melatonin has broad antioxidant and cellular protective properties. Number six, melatonin protects the skin against UV damage and regulates skin pigmentation. Number seven, melatonin is released from white blood cells, showing a role in immune regulation. And number eight, melatonin is involved in sex hormone release, reproduction, and sexual maturation. Typically, we think of two states of consciousness. We are either awake or asleep. It's important to appreciate four states of consciousness: wakefulness, sleep, dreaming, and transcendental moments, all of which are mediated by the neurotransmitter melatonin. With dreaming, the body is catatonic, meaning unresponsive, motionless, while inner visual imagery and symbolism are experienced. Transcendental moments represent a unique state of consciousness. This is an experience beyond our understanding of reality that changes how we look at the world. A famous example was Jesus with three of his disciples on the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus is elevated, at least partially, to his heavenly glory as the Son of God. He's joined by Moses and Joshua, both of whom died over 1,000 years prior. As this happens, these disciples gain a greater understanding of the deity of Christ, which wouldn't have been possible otherwise. They can't fully comprehend this, however, they are reassured that it is true, and it changes their view of the world and reality forever. After a transcendental moment, there is no going back from that experience. Given the many wonderful functions of melatonin, it's unfortunate to realize that melatonin levels decline with age. The most pronounced decline occurs between birth and age 35. As the protective effects of melatonin decline, there are increasing rates of certain cancers. Here, endometrial and cervical cancer patients were found to have lower levels of melatonin compared to cancer-free controls. What is the basis of this decline in melatonin? Does this represent normal aging? Is this a premature failure of the pineal gland? What are the implications for our highest faculties of mind, quality of life, and longevity? We know that dense calcifications also build up in the pineal gland as we age. These are exacerbated by our exposure to fluoride, which has insidiously increased with industrialization. How can we preserve the health of the pineal gland? Let's unpack this very important question. Somewhere in our earliest history, the pineal gland was named after the pine cone because its shape resembles that of a pine cone. It's unclear when this comparison was first made. However, conifer pine trees are one of the most ancient plant species on the planet, so this association would have been possible at any stage of human history. And the ancients recognized the special properties of the pineal gland with its lofty position in the geometric center of the brain, an intimate link to our body's perception of light. Perhaps they understood the role of the pineal gland in mediating dream states and psychedelic vision. The pineal gland came to be known as the seat of the soul, or the epicenter of enlightenment, and in cultures around the world, the pine cone became a sacred symbol, a symbolic representation of human enlightenment, with its spine spiraling in a perfect Fibonacci sequence in either direction, a pattern that is now considered sacred geometry. We have the story of Jacob, a patriarch of the Judeo-Christian tradition, living in 1500 BC, who famously wrestles with an angel throughout the night at a time of great inner conflict. As dawn is breaking, the angel wishes to leave, but Jacob hangs on, insisting that the angel first bless him. So the angel changes Jacob's name to Israel, meaning one who wrestles with God. And Jacob names that site Peniel, which in Hebrew means face of God, because he has seen God face to face and his life was preserved. It's the terminology of the pine cone, referring to the pineal gland, with the understanding that the pineal gland mediates our mystical or transcendental encounters. To round out that story, recall that Abraham is the father of the Hebrew nation. He was called by God at age 75 to leave his ancestral home, which is modern-day Iraq, and journey to an unknown land, which is now the location of Jerusalem. God promises Abraham that through his wife Sarah, he will become the father of many nations. Doubting God, Abraham's first child is Ishmael, who is conceived with his servant Hagar. Ishmael will become the father of the Muslim nation. Abraham's second son is Isaac, who was conceived with his first wife, Sarah. Isaac is the promised one. When Isaac is a young man, likely in his 20s, God instructs Abraham in a vision to kill Isaac as a sacrifice to the Lord. Obedient to his instructions, Abraham and Isaac climb Mount Moriah for the sacrifice. Abraham positions Isaac on a rock, and only when knife is raised does God intercede to stop the sacrifice, showing Abraham that he has provided a ram instead. Isaac will have two sons, Jacob and Esau. They are all living in the vicinity of modern-day Jerusalem. Esau is older and is to receive the family inheritance. When Isaac is elderly and blind, Jacob tricks Isaac into giving him the ancestral blessing and therefore the inheritance. Jacob then has to flee the wrath of Esau, who seeks to kill him. After running for 2 straight days, Jacob collapses in exhaustion and famously, using a stone for a pillow, falls into a deep sleep. In this dark night of the soul, he dreams of a ladder extending from earth into heaven, with angels of God ascending and descending on the ladder. Here, God reaffirms the covenant of Abraham with Jacob, Abraham's grandson, promising him the same blessings and promises that he gave to Abraham, and that these would be fulfilled and carried out through Jacob. God would later rename Jacob, calling him Israel. And Jacob names this site Bethel, meaning house of God. Jacob reaches his uncle Laban about 50 miles away, and there he goes on to marry his 4 wives, Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. Jacob is successful and becomes very wealthy. After 20 years, his relationship with Laban has soured, and Jacob determines to return to his homeland. In doing so, he must confront his brother Esau, and the location of their meeting is now called Peniel. The night before they meet, Jacob has his famous wrestling match with an angel. The wrestling match is thought to be related to Jacob's internal struggle with guilt, or to be symbolic of Jacob's struggle with his darker nature. They wrestle all night, and as dawn approaches, the angel can't disentangle himself. So the angel says, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob says, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the angel said, "Your name shall no more be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men, and you have prevailed." And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of this place Peniel, declaring, "I have seen God face to face, and yet my life was preserved." In this story, we have these astonishing encounters with the divine, commands for human sacrifice, struggles with angelic beings, and spectacular visions. Were these visions and mystical encounters received through the pineal gland? The pineal was named for the pine cone, and by this time in early history, pineal means face of God, reflecting early insights into the function of the pineal gland, bringing spectacular dreams, visions from beyond ourselves, and encounters with celestial beings. Following the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Hebrew nation develops, culminating in the building of Solomon's temple. And the cornerstone of that great temple is that rock, the altar of sacrifice for Isaac. The temple is to be the final resting place for the Ark of the Covenant. But Solomon's temple is destroyed by the Babylonians after only 400 years. The prophet Hosea then appears with his call to repentance. Hosea finishes his writings with a reference to Pinecone Symbolism. He writes, "I am like a green pine tree, your fruitfulness comes to me. Who is wise? He will realize these things. Who is discerning? He will understand them." And repentance does come. The temple is rebuilt some 400 years later. The second temple comes to be known as Herod's temple, and it's in the era of Herod's temple that Jesus has his public ministry. And while Jesus often speaks indirectly in parables, it seems that he teaches us about the pineal gland and the melatonin mechanism. It's impossible to be certain, but his words are freakishly on point. "The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light," referring to the organ of spiritual experience. And also, "The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light," referring to the chemical mediator of spiritual vision, perhaps revealing that mystical experience is available to all through deliberate but natural activation of the pineal gland. And Herod's temple is destroyed in AD 70 within a lifetime of Christ's death. 700 years later, our Muslim friends, the descendants of Abraham's firstborn Ishmael, build the Dome of the Rock to cover that sacred rock where Abraham was to sacrifice Isaac. And the Dome of the Rock stands to this day. Both Muslims and Jews wish to be as close to this noble rock as possible, for it bears great significance to both Abrahamic religions. The Wailing Wall in Jerusalem provides the closest access to the rock from Jewish territory. The rock is where God's divine presence is manifested more than any other place. Not only is this the site where Abraham attempted to sacrifice his son, not only is this the cornerstone of the two great temples, Muslims believe this is the place where God created the world and the first human, Adam. Furthermore, Muslims believe that the Prophet Muhammad began his night journey to heaven from this rock, which now lies at the center of the Dome of the Rock, sheltered by Islam, by Ishmael's descendants to this day. Let's review symbolism incorporating the pineal gland from across cultures. We see the same symbolism, with pinecone representing the pineal gland occurring repeatedly in geographically isolated religious traditions. For example, the Egyptians enshrined the Eye of Horus, which is a pictorial representation of human midbrain structures. On the left, we see Egyptian art depicting the Eye of Horus. The middle panel diagrams how each midbrain structure is represented, and on the right, we see how these structures are actually positioned in your head. The Egyptians were correct in identifying the significance of midbrain anatomy. This is the seat of emotion and memory, receiving and synthesizing input from the eyes, ears, nose, and viscera, or major organs. The pineal gland is a central midbrain structure. This is the part of the brain that makes us human, accounting for our personality, emotions, and spirituality. The Eye of Horus is one of Egypt's most visible symbols in art. A sacred stone for the ancient Egyptians was the Benben stone, depicted in the artwork on the left. Benben is translated ascension or to rise. The Benben is shaped like a pine cone, representing the pineal gland. The Bennu birds also appear in this mural. These are the precursors to the phoenix bird in ancient Greece. This is the bird that dies and is reborn. The phoenix is consumed into flames, collapses into ash, and is then reborn from the flames, a symbol of profound spiritual awakening and transformation. There are also two Kundalini serpents. The Kundalini refers to the raw static energy that supports all of life and is often depicted as a serpent. The Kundalini is the dormant power or energy present in every human being, lying like a coiled serpent at the base of the spine. The Kundalini is also illustrated as two serpents intertwined around one another as they climb the spine. This is reminiscent of the movement of cerebral spinal fluid, creating induction fields along the spinal column, and of the ascending energy hierarchy from sacrum to crown along the spine. Pinecone symbolism is also found in the capstone of the Egyptian pyramid. Without the capstone, the pyramid has 6 sides representing imperfection. But with the capstone in place, that is the pinecone or the pineal gland, the pyramid becomes 5-sided, representing perfection. Pinecone symbolism and the Kundalini serpents also feature prominently on the staff of Osiris, the Egyptian god of fertility, agriculture, and the afterlife. The Kundalini serpents spiral upwards to meet the pinecone or pineal gland. In the far right panel, we see the Uraeus serpent, an upright cobra, symbol of sovereignty, royalty, and divine authority, emerging from the forehead of Pharaoh in the area of the pineal gland. Striking close to home for us doctors, we have the caduceus, now the symbol of modern medicine. This is actually a reproduction of the staff of Osiris. The caduceus features 3 1/2 turns of the Kundalini serpents, spiraling upwards around the spine. These represent the dormant power or energy present in every human being, beginning at the base of the spine and flowing upwards to the crown. The 3 full turns represent past, present, and future, with the half turn representing timelessness, or the transcendent higher consciousness, which must be awakened. These turns may also represent the DNA, which can literally change expression based on our internal state, changing the physical body to reflect the mental. The Kundalini serpents arrive at the pinecone with liberation of the self, symbolized by the wings, and attainment of our highest potential, symbolized by the crown. This is our greatest expression of the divine. The crown is analogous to the Christian halo, which is sometimes drawn above the heads of those recognized for the attainment of spiritual mastery. Moving on to Sumeria, or Babylon, which is now southern Iraq near Baghdad, we find images of Marduk. Marduk was the patron god of Babylon, the Babylonian king of the gods, who presided over justice, compassion, healing, regeneration, magic, and fairness. His temple is considered the model for the biblical Tower of Babel. In this depiction, Marduk is holding a pine cone in his raised hand. This appears to be an important tool that is possibly instrumental in his work as a deity. And in Buddhism, the ruins of Angkor Wat in Cambodia are filled with pinecone imagery and symbolism. Multiple pinecone structures appear on the roofs of the temples and on the heads of every statue, representing the pineal gland. Pinecone symbolism and the pineal gland are clearly of great significance here. Hinduism is also filled with pinecone symbolism representing the pineal gland. Shiva is one of the principal deities of Hinduism, depicted here with hair stylized to look like a pine cone. Shiva has the Kundalini serpents draped around his neck. A third eye is painted on his forehead, oriented vertically, which is reptilian in nature, in the position of the pineal gland. The Hindus also recognize the lingam stone, which is a sacred stone that is very much the shape of a pineal gland. The Hajj in Islam is the annual pilgrim to the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. Every adult Muslim must make this journey at least once in their lifetime. Pilgrims converge into a large central square, moving in a circular pattern towards a central temple structure. This is the Kaaba, the house of God, which is considered the burial place of Hagar, second wife of Abraham and mother of Ishmael, father of the nation of Islam. This structure, the Kaaba, displays prominent third eye symbolism. On the corner of the Kaaba, there is a statue with a very large eye oriented vertically as before, which contains fragments of the Kaaba stone, a meteorite that is believed to have fallen from heaven to guide Adam and Eve. These stone fragments are encased within the vertical third eye, resembling the calcite microcrystals found within the pineal gland, which mediate our highest levels of perception, which may best be described as cosmic in nature. Across the oceans in South America, we find sculptures of the Mesoamerican god Quetzalcoatl, who is typically wearing a necklace made from multiple pine cones. These pine cones appear to be attached by energetic projections. The head of Quetzalcoatl is also emerging from the mouth of a Kundalini serpent, representing a powerful connection to the chakra system. In Southern Europe, there is pinecone symbolism in both the Greek and Roman traditions. On the left, we see a sculpture of Dionysius, the Greek god of death and rebirth, with a pine cone on the tip of a staff. Dionysius becomes Bacchus, shown on the right, the Roman god of drunkenness and revelry, still holding his pine cone staff. Since antiquity, pinecone symbolism has featured prominently in Roman Catholicism. For example, the staff of the Pope has always displayed a pine cone at the base of the crucifix, and this continues to this day. There is also a massive bronze pine cone, 13 feet tall, situated in the courtyard of the pine cone. This was first cast in the 1st or 2nd century AD by Publius Cincius Salvius, who inscribed his name on the base. Near the end of the 8th century, this mammoth pine cone was moved to the entrance hall in the medieval St. Peter's. It was dismantled and moved to its current position in 1608, where it has spent the last 400 years. The courtyard of the pine cone has an enigmatic sphere within a sphere sculpture at the center of the courtyard. This is a reptilian eye with vertically slit pupil, 40 feet in diameter and weighing 18,000 pounds. And there is machinery within the eye, seemingly the gears of the cosmos. The gears of the interior sphere are at a 90-degree angle to the gears of the exterior sphere, resembling a hyperdimensional physics model in which higher dimensions were thought to be at a 90-degree right angle away from the dimensions in our reality. In ancient Greece, as early as 400 BC, Plato wrote about the remarkable powers of the pineal gland. The soul has an organ, purified and enlightened, better than 10,000 corporal eyes, and truth becomes visible through this alone. A clear reference to the pineal gland, with capacity for seeing truth that eclipses that of conventional eyesight. In France, in the early 1600s, René Descartes refers to the pineal gland as the principal seat of the soul, the place in which all our thoughts are formed. In his words, there is a certain very small gland situated in the middle of the brain and suspended above the passage through which the spirits of the anterior cavities communicate with those in the posterior cavities. And mystic traditions are woven into the fabric of the United States. The founding fathers, or the framers of the Constitution, as they are often called, included George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, who all identified as Masons. The Masons were the builders of European cathedrals. They had the specialized skills and knowledge of how to create sacred geometry necessary for such work. The Masons evolved into a form of Christianity incorporating mystic symbolism. As an example, the Great Seal of the United States originally featured a phoenix bird, which is now a bald eagle, and on the reverse a pyramid with 13 stairs representing the original 13 colonies, and capped with an all-seeing eye comparable to a pineal third eye. These are Masonic symbols, and the inscription reflects the very lofty ambitions of the Masons. Anunit Coptus translates a new order for the ages because God has favored our undertakings. The ceiling of the U.S. Capitol building rotunda displays the Apotheosis of Washington, painted in 1865. Apotheosis refers to the raising of a person to the rank of God or the glorification of a person as an ideal. Raised to this elevated status, George Washington is surrounded by 13 women, again representing the 13 colonies. Returning to the Judeo-Christian tradition, the book of Revelation describes imagery that sounds like psychedelic vision, which may have occurred naturally through a pineal DMT mechanism. One of many examples includes the lamb with 7 horns and 7 eyes, described in Revelation 5:6, and the 7 spirits of God, described in Revelation 3:1. This dramatic symbolism has been interpreted to represent Jesus of Nazareth stepping forward as Christ the Messiah. With the awakening of his 7 energy centers, Jesus attained full Christhood. Having reached spiritual mastery, these became the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. If that interpretation is correct, these images may illustrate the potential for our influence and effectiveness if our energy systems were fully awakened and with complete congruence between centers. American author Mark Twain, who identified as a Mason, wrote about the pineal gland, or the all-seeing eye, as recently as 1899. In his words, the common eye sees only the outside of things and judges by that, but the all-seeing eye pierces through and reads the heart and the soul, finding there capacities which the outside didn't indicate or promise and which the other kind couldn't detect. It's widely held that Mark Twain was writing from his own experience. So ambrosia means you have found your own pleasure. You no longer need to squeeze pleasure out of another person. And this transforms your relationships. It's not that you are incapable or impotent, rather the compulsive need for sex is gone. Sadhguru explains that the third eye is not a physical entity. It's just that when your energies reach a certain peak within you, you have a new clarity of vision of life. You see everything from a completely different dimension. You see with an inner eye. You can turn it inward or outward. You see life beyond the normal limitations of your perception. The point of whatever spiritual process you are doing, consciously or unconsciously, is fundamentally to move to a higher plane of perception. Fundamentally, the whole thing is to raise your perception from a limited physical perception to a higher possibility. He describes the ascension of the energy centers very simply as follows. When your energies are in the lowest chakra, food and sleep will be the dominant factors in your life. When your energies move to the second chakra, then you are a pleasure seeker. You enjoy the physical world. When your energies move to the third chakra, then you are a doer in the world. You are an achiever. And when your energies move into the fourth chakra, you're a creative person. Maybe you're an artist or a painter. When your energies move to the fifth chakra, you are a powerhouse, and humans can be powerful in so many different ways. When your energies move into the sixth chakra, then you have clarity of vision. Your perception has risen above the physical. You see everything from a completely different dimension. You are fully realized intellectually. Nothing in life can disturb you, but you are still not ecstatic. People talk about achieving peace because they don't know what's beyond. They should talk about living in ecstasy rather than merely living in peace. When your energies reach the seventh or topmost chakra, then you become ecstatic. Without the need for any external stimulus, you are simply ecstatic. You live in ecstasy and no longer depend on things or other people to achieve and live in a state of bliss. There are many paths from the first to the sixth chakra, but no path from the sixth to seventh chakra. The only way is to jump. This is the purpose of meditation, to jump in faith that you will land. So what can we expect from activation of the pineal gland? Jagadish Vasudev, whose public alias is Sadhguru, represents the Hindu tradition. He tells us that the secretions of the pineal gland are known as amrita, the nectar of life. Once the pineal gland begins its secretions, everything about you becomes sweet and beautiful. The pineal gland brings a pleasure that is far bigger, more intense, and ecstatic than even sexual pleasure. All forms of meditation, one way or another, are ultimately trying to activate the pineal gland. It creates a whole inner pleasure, which makes all the outer pleasures look like kindergarten stuff. That's the reason why yogis are sitting with eyes closed. Not because they're against pleasure, they're just against small pleasures. Meditation and structured breathing techniques can stimulate the pineal gland in a big way, which leaves you drenched in a certain level of sweetness throughout the day. It leaves you in a state of ecstasy and blissfulness. Author Joe Dispenza provides an excellent summary of the mechanics and biochemical processes that occur during pineal gland activation. Given the tempo and demands of modern society, many of us invest considerable energy in activities of survival. Fight or flight, consumption, drive, aggression, dominance, even procreation. The associated thoughts and feelings are pent-up energy in the lower three centers. We need to learn to liberate this energy by opening our hearts, the fourth center, and channeling this trapped energy back to the brain. It can be difficult to open our hearts when we become preoccupied with survival. Still, we can open our hearts and channel our energy through a deliberate meditative process combined with a very specific breathing exercise. Structured breathing is designed to increase the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, along your spinal column and around your brain. When you inhale, the sutures of your skull, which are flexible joints between plates of bone within the skull, slightly open, and the bone at the base of your spine, the sacrum, actually flexes backward. When you exhale, the sacrum flexes forward and those sutures close. These movements push the CSF upwards from the sacrum to your crown, propagating a wave of CSF. And the CSF is made of proteins and salts in solution, which are both positively and negatively charged. The flow of CSF therefore represents the flow of charged particles, which creates electric current. The current induces an electromagnetic field that is concentrated or strongest along the axis of the spine. This field intensifies as your structured breathing increases the movement of CSF. Structured breathing is always nose breathing. Nose breathing forces the body to breathe deeply, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system. The nasal sinuses are the largest reservoir of nitric oxide in the body, which is released during nose breathing, entering the bloodstream by the fine capillaries of the nasal mucosa. Nitric oxide dilates blood vessels, increasing circulation through the body for greater flow of blood to the brain, heart, and pineal gland. We use structured breathing to circulate the CSF, triggering activation of the pineal gland. With practice, this strategic breathing technique may culminate in an intense surge of energy, feelings of gratitude and love, and possibly a transcendent or mystical experience, which may be a spectacular and profoundly insightful multidimensional vision. And this is your experience of ultimate energy. It's what we've been waiting for all along. So enjoy it. You have broken through the energy barrier. There are still many things you can do to improve your energy, but now you know how to get what you need and how to have more. Here is the breathing pattern. Close your eyes and inhale. As you inhale, with one slow and steady breath, lift the muscles of the perineum, the lower abdomen, and upper abdomen up and in with the intention of pulling your mind out of your body and liberating your energy. Pull the energy all the way up into your brain. Follow the breath from your perineum to your lower abdomen, through your upper abdomen, through your chest, through your throat, through the brain, all the way to the top of the head. Your attention is now at the top of your head. Keep it there. Now drop your shoulders down, straighten your spine, hold your breath, and squeeze a little bit more. Hold it a few seconds. You are compressing the crystals of the pineal gland. And then exhale through your nose, relaxing and emptying completely. This is the pattern to repeat. At first, the practice is mechanical. But as you practice, it becomes more intuitive and less step by step. It becomes one fluid motion. Feel free to play music that inspires you with the movement of energy. No lyrics. There are plenty of free tracks on YouTube. When you do the breathing properly and you have a little passion, you start to move this fluid, and there will come a moment when the sympathetic nervous system switches on, merging with the parasympathetic nervous system. And when this happens, all that energy stored up in the lower centers, the energy of stress, consumption, digestion, is drawn upwards to the brain. The liberation of that energy from your sacrum or root chakra to your crown creates a powerful polarity, negative at the sacrum and positive at the crown, effectively forming a magnet. An electromagnetic field is established and the body begins to liberate energy. The energy flow right up into the limbic brain and hits the pineal gland. This induces piezoelectric activity within the gland and biochemical reactions involving melatonin. The metabolites of melatonin include some of the most powerful antioxidants, compounds inducing a profound meditative state where you have no preoccupation with the outside world and where the inner world becomes more real. And finally, dimethyltryptamine or DMT, a natural and exceedingly powerful psychedelic. DMT may gift you with a profound and fantastical vision. While such experiences are usually brief, DMT also allows you to live out of your imagination, seeing possibilities and opportunities and rising above circumstance throughout your day. Changes in intrathecal pressure, which is the pressure within the blood-brain barrier where the pineal gland is located, stimulates piezoelectric activity within the tiny calcium carbonate crystals that are stacked within the gland. Like an antenna, the pineal crystals may access frequency information that is otherwise unavailable to us. The activated pineal gland then signals the pituitary, and the pituitary begins to release two powerful hormones, oxytocin and vasopressin. Oxytocin, also known as the love chemical, signals nitric oxide, which is already amplified by nose breathing. As nitric oxide causes the arteries to dilate, the circulation of oxytocin is increased. All of a sudden, you feel an incredible amount of love. This love and gratitude adds to your state of receivership. Vasopressin intensifies the contribution of the pituitary, increasing your attention, learning, memory, social attraction, and attachment, and limbic processing. The actions of melatonin, piezoelectric crystal activity, and pituitary influences become the perfect storm for a transcendent experience. All of a sudden, the brain becomes superlucent, with brain waves shifting to the very high frequency gamma range. Now there's more energy in the brain and you enter a state of superconsciousness. You experience an unprecedented level of coherence and order and connection with something greater. This inner vision is represented in pictures and is more real than anything you've experienced through your conventional senses. It's like a brain orgasm. And when it happens, try to relax and simply surrender into it. You have now experienced an ultimate state of energy, which is what you wanted from the beginning. Now you understand the full potential of your personal energy. You can have this experience again. You can practice making it better and better. So do the breath work with more intention and more passion as you learn to drive more and more energy up into your brain. It's important to overcome the energetic blocks that manage to develop within us, to clear pathways that your energy can move through. Otherwise, there will be problems. So many diseases are accompanied by a lowering of frequency and incoherent messaging. When the energy channels clear, the low frequency energy of the lower centers is released upwards to the high frequency centers. For many, this is the turning point for a host of medical complaints and chronic disease that otherwise was having its way within our bodies. We have discussed how the flow of cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, may induce an electromagnetic field within our bodies, with greatest density along the spinal column that circles out and around. This is a pulsating field, mirroring the flow of CSF, which we can enhance through the practice of structured breathing, as we have described. Let's take a deeper dive into the actual mechanics of this. The panel on the left shows how the flow of electric current creates an electromagnetic field that is perpendicular to the direction of current flow. Therefore, when an electric current passes along a wire that is configured into a series of spirals, forming a solenoid coil, the electromagnetic field becomes cumulative. The field is concentrated along the inside of the coil, then loops back and around the outside of the coil. As the current increases, the field intensity also increases. The middle panel shows how the principle of a solenoid applies to the movement of CSF along the spinal column. Maneuvers that increase the flow of CSF would amplify the associated field, while anything blocking this flow of CSF would diminish the field. The field strength may be infinitesimally small compared to commercial solenoids. However, biological systems are exquisitely sensitive to very low amplitude signals. The Schumann resonance is an excellent example of this. The panel on the right diagrams how energy is released from the first three centers and ascends along the spine, and how the body may become a magnet, producing an electromagnetic field. Again, even very weak fields can have profound biologic effects. Let's understand the basic mechanics of CSF flow. Approximately 150 mLs of CSF circulates along the central nervous system at any one time, yet the total amount of CSF produced daily is approximately 500 mLs. CSF is produced within the spine in fluid-filled chambers known as ventricles. Being produced in the brain, it's logical that the fluid flow should be downwards along the spinal column. It is something of a misnomer, however, to speak of CSF circulation, particularly in the spinal canal, as there is no continuous looping of flow. Instead, the spinal CSF fluctuates in biphasic tides of caudal or downwards flow and cephalic or upwards ebb. In fact, pulse waves from the contraction of the heart are known to be the primary drivers of CSF circulation, while the slower respiratory rhythm also plays a significant role. The systolic pulse wave from the heart's contraction is well established as the primary impetus for CSF circulation, but there is evidence that the respiratory rhythm superimposed upon the higher frequency cardiovascular pulse also influences fluctuations of CSF. We must also appreciate that the cranial sutures, which are joints between the separate plates of bones making up the skull, remain mobile throughout life. The joints flex slightly during respiration, and movements from the sacrum also occur, both contributing to the circulation of CSF. And finally, the brainstem itself moves with respiration. Like a plunger within the spinal column, there is caudal displacement of the brain during expiration and cephalad displacement with inspiration. Both movements add to the movement of CSF. Hence, the flow of CSF is dynamic and variable, as would be the associated electrical current and electromagnetic field, the influence of which we're only beginning to appreciate. These pulsatile flow fluctuations and changes in intrathecal pressure stimulate the pineal gland. Such stimulation is increased during structured breathing when CSF flow and pressure changes are enhanced. In meditative practice, the experience of awakening the dormant power potential of the Kundalini has been described as a powerful flow of energy from the base of the spine to the crown of the head, which is suggestive of CSF flow. Peak experiences, often associated with meditation or breath work and various therapies, may result from enhanced CSF flow. Several points we have alluded to demand further explanation. Number one, the visual apparatus of the pineal gland and what it might be seeing. Number two, the piezoelectric properties of calcium carbonate crystals within the pineal gland and the ability to sense informational frequencies not available to us otherwise. And three, the functions of melatonin and its psychedelic metabolites such as DMT. Can these natural endogenous compounds bring us into frank psychedelic states, or perhaps provide a psychedelic coloring of our perception and experience of reality? A basic understanding of conventional eyesight will allow us to understand the visual apparatus of the pineal gland. All light is electromagnetic energy, entering the eye via the lens and projecting back to the retina. Visible light represents a very narrow slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, which the retina senses using two types of cells responsible for vision, rods and cones. The human eye contains 125 total photoreceptor cells. These are either rods or cones. Rods make up the majority of photoreceptor cells, being 120 of the 125 total, and use a pigment known as rhodopsin to see dim light. Rods are located at the periphery of the retina. Cones are far fewer in number, being 5 of the 125 total, and use a photopigment called iodopsin to see bright light. Cones are located at the center of the retina. Light triggers nerve impulses within the rods and cones, which project back to the visual cortex for interpretation as meaningful images. We saw that reptiles possess a literal anatomic third eye between and slightly above their conventional eyes. This is a literal and externalized third eye. The equivalent structure in higher mammals is the pineal gland. Similar to reptiles, the mammalian third eye is located between and slightly above our conventional eyes, but is moved back into the center of our heads. On the left, we see histology slides of pinealocytes, the specialized cells of the pineal gland that synthesize melatonin. This is the hormone that governs the sleep-wake cycle, therefore mediating 4 states of consciousness: wakefulness, sleep, dreaming, and transcendental moments. On the right, we see electron micrograph images of the photoreceptor cells within the pineal gland. These pineal rods contain a unique photopigment, pinopsin, which is sensitive to blue-green light, with max absorption at a wavelength of 470 nanometers. Recall that rods are specialized to see dim light. But what are the sources of light within the pineal gland to stimulate these photoreceptive cells? How is this light represented to the visual cortex, and what information do these signals contain?
There are 3 potential sources of light for the pineal third eye to see. The first is photoluminescence, and more specifically, protein photoluminescence, which is observed with 3 aromatic amino acid residues, including tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine, with the predominant contribution resulting from tryptophan. Recall that protein photoluminescence is concentration dependent. As the demand for melatonin and its metabolites increase in a healthy and fully functioning pineal gland, there is increased demand for tryptophan, which is converted to tryptamine, then to serotonin, and finally melatonin. Concentrated tryptophan may result in flashes of light, which are a blue-green hue, which is the ideal wavelength for sensing by pinopsin, the photopigment of the pineal photoreceptor cells. These flashes also activate the fluorescent properties of calcite, melatonin, and DMT crystals within the pineal gland, which becomes an additional source of light for the photoreceptor apparatus to detect. The second source of light is the piezoluminescent properties of calcite microcrystals found within the pineal gland, and also of crystalline DMT. Piezoluminescence refers to light emission induced in certain solids by non-destructive dynamic pressure changes. Piezoluminescence is a phenomenon of mechano-optical conversion, in which materials respond to pressure-related mechanical actions by emitting photons of light. Importantly, the piezoluminescence is a response to crystal deformation rather than fracture. In the folk literature surrounding psychedelic production, DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, and even LSD have been reported to display piezoluminescence. The third source of light is the luminescent properties of calcite and melatonin crystals, which glow when excited by light from other sources. The glow appears as an expanded light source to the pineal visual apparatus and will be greatest in the presence of abundant melatonin when crystallization is likeliest to occur. So to summarize the proposed signal mechanism, production of melatonin involves chemical reactions that emit blue-green light. These signals are visible to the pineal eye. Pressure changes in the pineal gland also induce the piezoluminescent properties of calcite crystals and crystals of melatonin, 5-MeO-DMT, and DMT. These signals are also visible to the pineal eye. These flashes of light are brighter and more photostable than other wavelengths of light. And finally, This light production also causes calcite and melatonin crystals to fluoresce, which becomes a third light source visible to the pineal eye. How is this light represented to the visual cortex, and the information contained in these luminescent signals is presently unknown. Let's look at these pineal calcite microcrystals more closely. Here we see electron micrographs of calcite microcrystals isolated from the human pineal gland. These tiny crystals are less than 20 micrometers in length, with cubic, hexagonal, rhombohedron, or cylindrical geometries. These are the only known non-pathological occurrences of calcite in the human body, with the exception of otoconia within the inner ear, where calcite crystals contribute to balance and spatial orientation. These are completely distinct from hydroxyapatite or bony concretions that are also found in the pineal gland. The hydroxyapatite buildup is also known as brain sand and has a mulberry-type appearance and tends to accumulate with age. The calcite microcrystals are capable of piezoelectric activity, which converts pressure waves into electrical discharges, and also second harmonic generation, which refers to the doubling of an excitation frequency. We understand that higher energy centers have higher resonant frequencies, and we often hear that we should raise our rate of vibration to become higher performing and more effective. Here we find a physical mechanism for that vibrational shift, where a frequency reaching the pineal gland may double in its rate of vibration. Piezoelectric activity and second harmonic generation within the pineal gland crystals represents a unique electromechanical biological transducer mechanism in the human brain. While this signal transduction mechanism may provide our most sensitive awareness, the precise physiologic role is not yet established. Let's look at these pineal calcite microcrystals more closely. Here we see electron micrographs of calcite microcrystals isolated from the human pineal gland. These tiny crystals are less than 20 micrometers in length, with cubic, hexagonal, rhombohedron, or cylindrical geometries. These are the only known non-pathological occurrences of calcite in the human body, with the exception of otoconia within the inner ear, where calcite crystals contribute to balance and spatial orientation. These are completely distinct from hydroxyapatite or bony concretions that are also found in the pineal gland. The hydroxyapatite buildup is also known as brain sand and has a mulberry-type appearance and tends to accumulate with age. The calcite microcrystals are capable of piezoelectric activity, which converts pressure waves into electrical discharges, and also second harmonic generation, which refers to the doubling of an excitation frequency. We understand that higher energy centers have higher resonant frequencies, and we often hear that we should raise our rate of vibration to become higher performing and more effective. Here we find a physical mechanism for that vibrational shift, where a frequency reaching the pineal gland may double in its rate of vibration. Piezoelectric activity and second harmonic generation within the pineal gland crystals represents a unique electromechanical biological transducer mechanism in the human brain. While this signal transduction mechanism may provide our most sensitive awareness, the precise physiologic role is not yet established. This slide illustrates the piezoelectric principle using a quartz crystal for demonstration purposes. With no stress applied to the quartz crystal, positive and negative charges are evenly distributed. But when tension is applied, positive and negative polarities occur at the top and bottom of the crystal. When the stress is then reversed into a compressive stress, the polarities become reversed. Repetitive pressure changes applied to the crystal or vibration within the crystal creates repetitive charge reversal, which is electric current. Perhaps the most familiar example of the piezoelectric effect is a classic cigarette lighter, where a compressive stress on the crystal elements results in an electric spark, enough to light the fuel. The piezoelectric effect is very useful with other instrumentation applications, such as microbalances and ultrafine focusing of optical assemblies. It is also the basis of imaging techniques with atomic resolution, such as scanning, tunneling microscopy, or atomic force microscopy. Such subtle responses to piezoelectric effects would be expected in the pineal gland. This unique electromechanical biological transducer mechanism may provide our most sensitive access to information from both nearby and distant sources, including our capacity for remote viewing. The most obvious function of the pineal gland is the production of melatonin, which mediates the sleep-wake cycle. During the day, when there is light, serotonin predominates in the pineal gland. Recall that serotonin is your happy hormone, while conversion to melatonin is inhibited. At night, in the absence of light, serotonin is converted to melatonin at a rate of 2.5 milligrams per day. Melatonin is known as a hypnagogue because it brings on the sleep state. Then, when the sun rises, the sleep period is over, and melatonin converts back to serotonin. Times of transition in and out of sleep represent unique periods of hypnosis when your mind is wide open to influence. And this is the chemistry of our sleep-wake cycle. The pineal gland keeps us happy while we're awake, and melatonin gives us sleep while bringing us dreams, transcendental moments, and altered states of consciousness. Chemical transformations involving melatonin produce a number of molecular intermediates that have some very unique properties, mediating our lucid dreams, transcendental moments, and even psychedelic vision. Here is an overview of those chemical pathways. Tryptophan is one of 20 amino acids and responsible for protein photoluminescence within the pineal gland. Tryptophan is also converted to serotonin and melatonin. But tryptophan can also be converted to tryptamine and dimethyltryptamine, known as DMT. DMT is a powerful and naturally occurring psychedelic which plays a central role in dream consciousness and is capable of inducing a transformative psychedelic experience. It was first recognized that DMT is released under extraordinary conditions, such as extreme physical stress, birth or childbirth, or during a near-death experience. We know now that DMT is typically present in the peripheral blood, where it may combine our experience of concrete reality with interpretive nuances having a dreamlike quality. It's possible that mystical experiences are a part of our basic nature as humans, combining with our experience of reality in unexpected and surprising ways.
Many physicians are familiar with reports of near-death experiences, or NDEs. This is especially true for cardiologists who often care for patients who have come close to dying, whether during a life-threatening heart attack or a lethal heart rhythm disturbance. We have learned that NDEs are largely mediated by pineal DMT. This slide shares an example of an NDE from my practice. True story. A patient aged 20s with a recurrent syndrome of passing out. He was finally brought to hospital and with heart monitor attached, suddenly experienced 38 seconds of documented asystole, meaning the heart was documented not to beat for 38 seconds, which implies no circulation of blood to the brain during this time. When he regained consciousness, calmed down, and stopped asking for his grandma, he had an incredible story to tell. The patient had a classic NDE. He found himself standing at the entrance to a large tunnel of light. Thousands of people were present. His grandma was standing in front of everyone. In reality, she had died at age 96, but seemed much younger and healthier here. And grandma was smiling. He started to walk towards her, but couldn't get close. It was incredibly bright, but not hot at all. The experience was more vivid than any reality. Then suddenly it was over, and all these strangers had their hands on him. He tried to push them away. What a nightmare. Then, with time, oh yes, this is reality, and that tunnel of light was the dream. All of this within 40 seconds, consistent with the very rapid onset and short duration of action of DMT. And this man's experience is typical of NDEs, with a tunnel of light lined by family members and heavenly beings, as they have been experienced throughout human history. And this construct is reproduced by artists throughout history, attempting to depict our transition to the afterlife as accurately as possible. On the left, we see a painting from the 1500s showing souls being transported to heaven. They are elevated to a tunnel of light and then joined by other immortal beings at the end of the tunnel. Again, the tunnel of light is almost universally present in near-death experiences. In the middle, we see a painting from 1924 used as an illustration for Dante's Divine Comedy. Again, there is a tunnel of light, in this case with a host of angels or other spirits. And on the right is a stained glass window at the Valley View Bible Church in Paradise Valley, Arizona, built in the 1960s. This relatively modern construction chose to feature the same tunnel of light filled with spiritual beings. An actual NDE is experienced when the conditions of death are met. Should these physiologic conditions continue much longer, the death will become irreversible. This cartoon from the New Yorker illustrates this point. Yes, life is in the process of departing, but if the individual is immediately resuscitated, the pre-existing life can be saved. Hence the 5-second rule, during which the original life can be brought back. One of my cardiac anesthesia colleagues shared a similar experience from another patient, a story told to me in 2018. A male patient in his 60s underwent an especially difficult cardiac surgery and suffered a cardiac arrest at the end of the procedure just after coming off bypass. This is a particularly vulnerable period, and the surgical team had to perform a difficult resuscitation and lost effective perfusion several times before the patient was finally stabilized. The next day, this anesthesiologist, who is also my friend, sees the patient during rounds. The patient was sitting up in bed, eating breakfast. Knowing how they had nearly lost the patient at the end of a long surgery, the anesthesiologist was pleasantly surprised to see the patient doing so well and asked the patient if he is okay. The patient looks like he has just seen a ghost. He is completely serious. I went to heaven yesterday. He wants to share his epiphany and tell his story. I was in a large room full of light, very warm and comfortable, and there was a large number of other people in the room with me. I saw many members of my family. People I hardly remembered were there. They walked towards me. They were happy to see me, and I was happy to see them, don't get me wrong. So I asked them, "Am I in heaven?" They answered, "Yes." He asked, "Am I dead?" They answered, "We don't know." So I asked, "Can I see Jesus?" And they answered, "You already have." And then it ended. Again, this near-death experience occurred in the setting of circulatory arrest. The patient would have died permanently, but circulation was restored in time. So the patient lives to tell the story of his near-death experience, which, with so many of the features reported by others. There is no universally accepted definition of NDE. However, there are common features. It's an out-of-body experience. The setting is often a tunnel or room filled with bright light. The tunnel or the room has many relatives, familiar faces, and also people you may not remember, or members of your family you didn't think you knew about. The environment is pleasant, warm and inviting, and exchanges are pleasant and heartwarming. Actual NDEs are now understood to be mediated by DMT from the pineal gland. This was demonstrated in a 2018 scientific study published in Frontiers in Psychology. 13 healthy volunteers, 7 males, 6 females, average age 34, received DMT intravenously, 14 to 20 milligrams, which was infused over 30 seconds, with peak psychedelic experience occurring after 2 to 3 minutes, which was mostly resolved by 20 minutes. The experience, they later reported, was compared to a matching group who had had actual NDE events using the following questions. Number 1, did they encounter deceased or religious spirits? Number 2, did they encounter other mystical beings? Number 3, did they experience A, an unearthly environment, B, feelings of peace and pleasantness, C, a sense of harmony or unity, D, altered time perception, E, separation from the body, F, feelings of joy, G, bright lights, H, speeding up thoughts, I, an understanding of everything, J, a border or point of no return, K, precognitive visions, L, extrasensory perceptions, or M, life review. Results revealed that all 13 participants scored above the standard threshold for agreement between an actual NDE and a DMT experience. This strongly supports the notion that near-death experiences are mediated by a large discharge of DMT from the pineal gland at the onset of death. DMT is an exceedingly powerful hallucinogen and is often called the spirit molecule. Here are some artistic impressions of the DMT experience. People who take DMT report that they are blasted out of their bodies like out of a cannon. They go out somewhere and they encounter spiritual beings and deities of various sorts. Then 10 minutes later, they are back. The experience is reminiscent of a shamanic procession as described in ancient times. Participants report that the chemicals more or less killed them. They dissolved to a skeleton, then climbed a tree that unites heaven and earth, reaching the realm of the gods, where they experienced a revelation, and then they return. This is similar to DMT, which has a very short mechanism of action, so the experience is actually finished in minutes. We hardly have the vocabulary to describe the DMT experience. It's a journey through a fantastic, swirling, multifaceted system of gateways into a world filled with temples, pyramids, and palaces of pulsating light. There are elves, aliens, Egyptian gods, creatures that defy description. It's the entire possible population of the collective unconscious, a magical place where the totality of phenomenal existence can be experienced in one often terrifying transpersonal flash. No two DMT experiences are alike, and the experience brings more questions than answers. Such mystical experiences can transform your personality permanently. Those who have tried DMT or participated in an ayahuasca ceremony even once measure a full standard deviation higher in openness, even 1 year later. Openness is the creativity dimension, and this seems to be a permanent transformation. About 80% report that their ayahuasca or DMT-mediated psychedelic experience is among the top 3 most important things that has ever happened to them. We note that this is also true for psilocybin, a type of mushroom, which has been studied in patients with terminal cancer at Johns Hopkins University, where a single dose of psilocybin was transformative in the patient's relationship to their impending death. For those who don't have access to pharmaceutical-grade DMT or psilocybin, ayahuasca is a DMT analog that can be produced from certain plants in the Amazon. Participating in an ayahuasca ceremony brings on a sustained DMT experience lasting several hours. There are 2 key ingredients in ayahuasca. First, a perennial flowering shrub from the coffee family, Psychotria viridis, provides the DMT. Second, a South American liana, a woody vine that grows from the floor of the jungle and can reach 30 meters in length and uses trees for vertical support as it climbs in search of sunlight. Both plants have hallucinogenic properties. DMT is rapidly broken down by enzymes called monoamine oxidases, MAOs, in the liver and GI tract. For this reason, DMT must be combined with an MAO inhibitor, which allows the DMT to have a sustained effect. This is provided by the bark of the liana vine. When combined, these 2 plants form a powerful psychedelic brew that affects the central nervous system, leading to an altered state of consciousness that can include hallucinations, out-of-body experiences, and euphoria. Ayahuasca is an amazing substance. These 2 plants hardly grow in the same place and need to be cooked together with some special techniques. How did the Amazonians figure this out? They claim the plants told them how to do it. This story sounds similar to the discovery that LSD is hallucinogenic. Albert Hofmann first synthesized LSD but was unaware of its visionary potential and had set it aside in his laboratory. Some 5 years later, as he walked past the shelf, he sensed the vial say to him, "Take me." Hoffman took the smallest amount of LSD possible and experienced the first LSD hallucinogenic trip. An ayahuasca ceremony involves drinking the hallucinatory plant and vine tea blended under the guidance of a respected shaman for a long night spent in deep connection to a higher intelligence and an understanding of one's true self. A typical ayahuasca ceremony lasts a full night. The trip can last up to 5 hours. Ayahuasca powerfully affects the serotonergic system, like all psychedelics, and gives the experience of being transported to another world. An ayahuasca experience is described as an encounter with the divine, the infinite, the mysterious, that which is beyond the limited perspective of your mind, and that won't be experienced in a way that makes sense to your brain. Song sung by the shaman who is serving the ayahuasca is an integral part of the ceremony. Through these songs, the visionary effects of ayahuasca are enhanced. Ayahuasca is also referred to in the feminine because users have said that the voice of higher intelligence that they hear during the ceremony is female. She, meaning the plant, speaks to you directly and tells you what you need to work on in your life. Be forewarned that you may not necessarily like the information that the divine infinite mystery chooses to share with you. Some people report indescribable horror with feelings of impending death. Alternately, you may realize that everything perceived through your five senses and assimilated by your mind is contrived or false. Others say that ayahuasca opens their hearts in ways that it has never been opened before. Be prepared to experience your mind deconstruct firsthand, to be shattered, and then reconstruct itself back together. The experience will be ineffable, beyond language. Putting it into words is daunting, if not possible. 10 years of therapy downloaded in a night seems to be a fairly universal analogy. Returning ceremonies may be completely different. There's nothing routine about experiencing the divine, infinite, or mysterious. Each experience is akin to just a small drop in the ocean. We understand that the pineal can produce DMT, and this naturally occurring psychedelic has some spectacular effects. But do we need to experience extreme stress or have a near-death experience to appreciate what the pineal gland is capable of? This very intriguing interview with Dr. John Dean, who was at UCSD at the time of the interview, reviews some of the latest research involving DMT. We now know that DMT is produced endogenously within the brain, and we have direct confirmation of DMT produced in the pineal gland. At lower concentrations, DMT produces feelings of euphoria, whereas at higher concentrations, DMT mediates psychedelic experiences that are intensely visual. And DMT is present in the visual cortex of the brain in concentrations that are comparable to serotonin. DMT didn't necessarily originate in the pineal gland. So we are producing this hallucinogen, which is playing a role in modulating our everyday waking reality. This suggests that our perception of reality is somewhat malleable. It's consistent with the concept that our reality is a simulation. We may be a participatory perspective in the mind of God. It seems that a large cohort of meditators can achieve the euphoric experience of DMT, with a much smaller subset attaining the visual experience involving higher dimensions. These findings provide new insights into human potential, what will really move the needle in terms of societal evolution in the future. If you don't have access to DMT, ayahuasca, or psilocybin, it's possible to have a DMT-mediated psychedelic experience naturally. Grandmaster Montauk Chia describes how this is possible. It's a technique used as advanced training for Buddhist monks. The candidate monks are taken into complete and total darkness where they will not be exposed to any light for at least 10 days. Recall that melatonin is produced during darkness at a rate of about 2.5 milligrams per day, and that sunlight will reverse this reaction. So in the absence of any light, the forward reaction proceeds uninterrupted. As the melatonin accumulates, the participants are very relaxed and sleepy. After 15 to 20 milligrams of melatonin have accumulated, which occurs after 6 to 8 days, we have the production of pinolin, which causes a profound sense of calm and relaxation. After 20 to 25 milligrams of melatonin have accumulated, which occurs at days 8 to 10, 5-MeO-DMT is produced, and this results in lights, colors, visions, and scenes from a past life. And after this, DMT is finally produced. The individual is now immersed in an out-of-body experience, entering hyperspace, which is experienced as new dimensions of being and encounters with a variety of mystical beings. So sustained total darkness allows for uninterrupted melatonin production, eventually spilling over into pinolin, 5-MeO-DMT, and finally DMT, progressing to an unparalleled psychedelic experience, all without the use of any drugs. Retreats into total darkness have been practiced by many religions across cultures for thousands of years, and not surprisingly, we find venues around the world where perfect total darkness can be achieved. Here we see such spaces in Ireland, Paris, Rome, Bulgaria, Egypt, China, and India, to name a few. Certainly the ancient Greeks would use caves to enter into cataleptic states of trance, a near-death trance, and in these states of non-rationality they would commune with the goddess and bring back things that are now part of Western civilizations. Psychedelics are just one twist on these states of non-rationality. Most of us are familiar with the Pythagorean Theorem from geometry and other geometric relationships given to us by the ancient Greek philosopher Pythagoras in 500 BC. It's important to realize that Pythagoras didn't figure out these relationships with pencil and paper. Rather, he saw the relationships of geometric forms while he was in a cave. In his experience, he transcended out of the cave to the edge of the universe, and from there he saw the famous relationships still used by architects and engineers to this day. If you're wondering how to have your own cave-like experience, darkroom retreats are now available. These are organized by Montauk Chia, for example, and are pictured here. Darkroom experiences are described as amazing for several reasons. The early days of the retreat are spent catching up on sleep, allowing the eyes to recuperate from overstimulation of our visual world, releasing the grip of mental concerns, plans, and agendas, and simply letting your energy settle. You get the best rest of your life because there is no light and no visual images which limit mental projections. Food is brought in, and a clean shower and toilet are 10 feet from your bed. Since you have no responsibilities or concerns, the total darkness totally relaxes the mind and body. You're in a climate-controlled void, an enclosed area, and for the first time since your physical birth. A darkroom retreat is a unique experience. It helps to quiet the mind and gives the body an incredible rest, supporting a natural rejuvenation. A darkroom experience will flood your bloodstream with melatonin, with all its antioxidant and anti-aging properties. Meditation in a dark room stimulates the pineal gland, enhancing clarity and discernment. Dreams and sleep become more lucid, meaning you're aware that you're in a dream and can control what you do in the dream. A state of continuous consciousness arises in which there is no break in conscious awareness. Meditation can continue during sleep and during non-sleeping hours. Dreams become stories and lessons, often in mythological settings. Feelings of relaxation, love, and acceptance are dominant. Finally, there are visions, lights, and swirling colors. Scenes that seem to belong to a past life appear and pass by. And finally, there are fantastical visions of aliens and elves, temples and pyramids, pulsating palaces and strange deities. This is described as an encounter with the superconscious that defies description. So the ancient Tao proverb proves to be true. When you go into the dark, and this becomes total, the darkness soon turns to light. And similarly, the words of Jesus, the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. Matthew 4:16. So we are understanding how the pineal apparatus is at work in our bodies. We understand the movement of charged particles within the CSF and how that creates electric current with an associated electromagnetic field. It's apparent how the spinal column acts as a solenoid, increasing the intensity of that electromagnetic field. As we practice the mechanics of structured breathing, we increase the movement of CSF, which creates electric current and electromagnetic field energy. We increase pressure fluctuations within the CSF, which may activate the piezoelectric properties of pineal calcite crystals. All of these things are stimulating the pineal gland, increasing production of melatonin with further protein luminescence and production of 5-MeO-DMT and DMT, culminating in a sudden synergistic burst of activity within the pineal gland. With all of this suddenly set in motion, we experience a burst of energy, and this is a sublime energy, exactly what you know instinctively should be possible. And with the hormone milieu that is invoked in this process, this new level of energy is accompanied by feelings of love, joy, and appreciation. Your experience may include a transcendental or mystical quality, with reality perceived as nonlinear, and with access to new informational fields, which may be quantum in origin. It's a natural euphoria that everyone should be able to experience and that can sustain you throughout your day. With this background, the words of Jesus can be understood to describe the melatonin mechanism. That is, how to activate the pineal gland and elicit a DMT response. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, Matthew 4:16. This is sustained total darkness, giving visions of light through pineal gland activation. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. These words, taken at face value, seem to describe a third eye mechanism, where activation of the pineal gland brings the experience of your body being filled with light. The words of Jesus should always be understood to convey universal truth about the nature of reality. This is Jesus giving his listeners a formula for having a mystical spiritual experience. Doing so is consistent with Christ's central message that everyone can have a personal experience with the divine. Let's remember that Jesus lived at a time where Greece had been the epicenter of the European spiritual universe for the last 1600 years. The most famous secret religious rites of ancient Greece were known as the Eleusinian Mysteries, which were observed regularly between 1600 BC and 400 AD. Jesus' audience would have been familiar with the Eleusinian Mysteries. The mysteries were secret religious rites that represented the institutional use of psychedelics. The Eleusinian Mysteries were held each year at Eleusis, Greece, 14 miles northwest of Athens. Participants were sworn to secrecy on pain of death as to the details of the ritual. At Eleusis, initiates would rest and fast, and then drink a barley and mint beverage called kykeon. This drink was infused with ergot, a psychotropic derived from a fungus found in grain. After drinking the kykeon, the participants entered the telesterion, an underground theater where the secret ritual took place, like a symbolic reenactment of death and rebirth. Whatever happened in the telesterion, those who entered in would come out the next morning forever changed for the better. Something at Eleusis convinced initiates that they had transcended their mortality and were guaranteed an afterlife. They no longer feared death. A similar experience in modern times is possible with psilocybin, a mushroom, where a transformative psychedelic experience occurs with only a single dose. It's as though the individual receives a new vision for their own potential, which is enough to desist patterns of destructive behavior, such as smoking and drinking alcohol, which may have resulted from a person's search for meaning in the first place, which is now satisfied. And this transcendence of death was central to Greek religious thought. An inscription over the door at St. Paul's Monastery on Mount Athos captures this succinctly. If you die before you die, then you won't die when you die. The Eleusinian Mysteries allowed for this experience of death prior to death, which imparted immortality. The psychedelic formula put users in touch with the central animating spirit of mankind, their ancestors, and the golden chain stretching down through the centuries. This is the spirit that animates us when we are creative, and note that animate means to be possessed by a spirit, in this case a benevolent spirit that utters truth. Mystical experiences move away the blinders that stop us from perceiving this. In the act of creation, you don't always know what you are doing. Something is working through you. And virtually every important thinker and writer in antiquity, everyone who was anyone, was an initiate of the mysteries. Jesus spoke against the backdrop of Greek religious culture, and when Jesus was asked why he spoke in parables, he answered that he was trying to relay a mystery. The Greek word is mysterion, meaning a religious secret, confided only to the initiated, and not to be communicated by them to ordinary mortals. Anyone familiar with the Eleusinian Mysteries would understand that they were hearing something that otherwise would be a sworn secret. Unlike the Eleusinian Mysteries, where participants were sworn to secrecy, Jesus shared the secrets for spiritual mysticism, so everyone had the means to pursue such a transcendent, ineffable experience. The answer was sustained total darkness with uninterrupted production of melatonin within the pineal gland, evoking the melatonin cascade with production of DMT. There was something transformative and specific to Christianity that's tangled up with the hallucinogens. Now everyone can have a personal experience with the divine. Anyone can sit in darkness and experience a body full of light, having a mystical encounter with the divine. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, Matthew 4:16. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light, Matthew 6:22. And behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, 1 Corinthians 15:51. Is this great light seen through pineal activation? That is the single eye or third eye filling the body with light? And in an era where everyone knew the Elusionian Mysteries were a sworn secret, here we are told a mystery, that we will be changed in the twinkling of an eye, in the flashes within the pineal third eye. A healthy and robust and resilient pineal gland could not be more important. Clearly, we want the internal environment of the pineal gland to be as pristine as possible to fully benefit from serotonin, melatonin, 5-MeO-DMT, and DMT, and from the piezoelectric effects of crystalline structures. This is our capacity for sleep, lucid dreaming, feelings of joy and rapture, psychedelic overtones to our perception and experience of reality, and for mystical contact with the divine. This is our capacity to perceive signals carried by quantum energy fields represented to us as vivid imagery. We want unimpeded access to our highest functions of mind. The reality is that our pineal glands have never been in worse shape. In modern society, the pineal gland becomes heavily calcified. This begins during teenage years and is substantial by early adulthood. I'm not aware of data reporting the true incidence of pineal calcification in the population. However, radiologists interpreting high volumes of CT scans of the head comment they're amazed anyone over the age of 40 can sleep. They see such extensive calcification in almost everyone. Here we see a cross-sectional image from a head CT. The bright spot in the middle is the calcified pineal gland. The brightness of the image reflects the presence of bone in that area. It's evident that the pineal gland contains a greater density of bone than the surrounding skull. Pineal calcifications represent hydroxyapatite crystals, which are the crystal structure in bones and teeth. Fluoride is readily incorporated into hydroxyapatite crystals, and the presence of fluoride promotes the formation and deposition of hydroxyapatite. As a calcifying tissue that is exposed to a high volume of blood flow, second only to the kidneys, the pineal gland readily accrues fluoride, resulting in an exaggerated accumulation of bone per unit volume. In fact, the calcified parts of the pineal gland contain the highest fluoride concentrations in the human body, exceeding that of teeth and skeletal bone. We know that there is an age-related decline in melatonin levels, and as the protective effects of this powerful antioxidant are lost, there is a corresponding rise in other adverse conditions, such as cancer. The calcified deposits in the pineal are associated with decreased numbers of functioning pinealocytes and reduced melatonin production, at least partially accounting for this decline in melatonin levels. And the solution is not as simple as taking melatonin supplements. It's true that melatonin receptors are present throughout the body, and these are relevant to inducing a sleep state. The pineal gland is uniquely positioned, straddling the blood-brain barrier, and therefore has direct access to the peripheral blood as well as to this very protective chamber containing the brain, spinal tissues, as well as CSF. Levels of melatonin within the blood-brain barrier are much higher and tightly regulated compared to the peripheral blood or plasma. When melatonin is taken as a supplement, only levels in the peripheral blood are impacted. Supplemental melatonin does not gain access to the blood-brain barrier and CSF, where the major actions of melatonin take place. While supplemental melatonin has its uses, let's realize that this does not replace endogenously produced melatonin. We need a healthy and responsive pineal gland. Beyond altered sleep and precocious puberty, loss of pineal gland function may represent loss of our highest sensitivities and faculties of mind. Lower levels of melatonin mean less sleep, fewer lucid dreams, and less DMT, meaning less psychedelic modulation of our own perception. There is less luminescence, less fluorescence, and overall less for the pineal apparatus to see. Loss of piezoelectric activity and second harmonic generation by the calcite crystals of the pineal gland mean less frequency information obtained from electromagnetic or quantum energy fields, which is otherwise beyond our conventional senses. Without robust pineal function, more and more is going over our heads, so to speak, but literally. We progressively drift towards a state of psychosclerosis or hardening of the attitudes and a spiritual lights out. Without our spiritual faculties, consumerism and materialism is all we know. We come to believe there is no life beyond what is right now. There is nothing before, nothing after, nothing higher, nothing lower, nowhere else to go, nothing else to do. It's the annihilation of the finest aspects of the human experience. And death due to old age may represent a state of complete pineal calcification, with total abolition of the sleep-wake cycle. Here we see light microscopy of pineal gland tissue and pineal brain sand, then electron microscopy of the brain sand particles. The pinealocytes account for 95% of the cellular content of the gland. These are irregularly shaped cells with peripheral processes and lightly staining large round nuclei. The calcifications occurring within the pineal gland are known as brain sand. These particles represent bone formation being composed of hydroxyapatite crystals containing both calcium and phosphorus. These concretions take on a mulberry appearance and have fluoride content exceeding that of skeletal bones and teeth. These concretions image brightly on X-ray and CT imaging, making the pineal gland easy to identify. As brain sand accumulates, pinealocytes are replaced and gland function is impaired. Excessive brain sand is universal in populations exposed to high levels of fluoride, both as an industrial byproduct and from drinking water, even toothpaste. Here we see additional images of pineal gland concretions. In the top image, panel A shows the development of extrapineal calcification in a concentric lamellar pattern. Panel B shows an intrapineal calcification, also with concentric lamellar pattern. In both images, panel A shows an acervulus or brain sand particle surrounded by connective tissue. In panel B, we see the concentric lamellar pattern typical of bone formation, ultimately forming a mulberry-like structure with multiple lobes as seen in panel C. The schematic on the right shows an acervuli with the development of concentric laminations forming a ring structure, which may then differentiate into an aggregated or mulberry-like or non-aggregated growth. Pineal calcification is greatly accelerated by the presence of fluoride, which accumulates in the pineal gland at levels exceeding those of teeth. Fluoride is an element that occurs naturally in nature in small amounts. Fluoride is also a well-known neurotoxin. Fluoride is frequently released during industrial processing, and decades of industrialization have left us overexposed to fluoride. In addition, fluoride is added to 75% of community water supplies across the United States. This is reportedly done to promote dental health, particularly in children. However, this is not the pharmaceutical-grade fluoride found in toothpaste, and water supplies often represent a convenient dumping ground for this industrial waste. The result is contamination of the entire water table with toxic fluoride. Sadly, even commercially bottled water lacks proper filtration with a reverse osmosis system and contains fluoride. Even the more expensive brands of bottled water are reported to contain substantial fluoride. For those of us with a passion for pineal health, let's identify ways to lower or even eliminate our exposure to fluoride. Such practices may help to reverse pineal gland calcification, although this has not been proven. The most reliable way to remove fluoride from your drinking water is by reverse osmosis. A water filtration system with reverse osmosis can easily be installed to work with your kitchen sink. Alternately, reverse osmosis systems are available in major grocery stores. This allows refills of your 3 to 5 gallon jugs with properly filtered drinking water. The water quality is excellent as these systems also include a sediment filter, double carbon filter, post-carbon filtration polishing filter, mineralization for electrolyte enhancement, and ultraviolet light to eliminate microorganisms. Presently, I have 6 of these 5-gallon jugs that I refill at a local Whole Foods store for my drinking water at home. Let's recognize that fluoride belongs to a class of elements known as the halides, which includes iodide, bromide, and fluoride. Of these species, fluoride is frankly toxic, while bromide is at best neutral. Iodide, unlike the other halides, is essential for our health. It's important to have an abundance of iodide in our diet, as this helps to purge heavy metals including lead, mercury, aluminum, and cadmium. Interestingly, iodide is also a natural radiation blocker. Iodide was issued by the nation of Belgium in 2016 as part of a contingency plan against a nuclear leak or nuclear attack. Iodide is available in supplemental form, either as drops or from plants such as kelp, which are very high in iodide. Just a pinch of kelp is enough to provide 150 micrograms daily of iodide. I personally supplement with kelp on a daily basis. Chelating agents are substances that can bind up certain toxins, promoting their elimination from the body. Chelation therapy is the preferred medical treatment for toxic metal poisoning, including lead, mercury, arsenic, and iron. Chelating agents bind other toxic species as well, including halide compounds, fluoride, and bromide. Certain greens are natural chelating agents, including spirulina, chlorella, wheatgrass, and barleygrass. EDTA is a pharmaceutical-grade chelating agent that is available over the counter. Such products should be used under medical supervision as they may cause dangerous electrolyte derangements, particularly hypocalcemia. I personally supplement with chlorella on a daily basis and EDTA several times a week when I'm able to take it between meals, and that's to avoid binding up healthy nutrients from our diet before they are absorbed. Holy basil is a plant that is considered the mother medicine of nature. It has been revered since ancient times as a herb that can promote a healthy body, mind, and spirit. The Hindus worshipped holy basil, which they call Tulsi, meaning the incomparable one. Medicinal preparations are made from the leaves, stems, and seeds. Holy basil is often used for cooking Thai dishes, and its spicy flavor has influenced its common name, hot basil. This type of basil is much spicier than other basil varieties. In Western medicine, holy basil is perhaps most valued as an adaptogen, meaning a substance that helps the body adapt to stress. The plant has been used to combat the negative effects of stress in the body, maintaining stable blood sugars and promoting longevity. Holy basil is used to treat many conditions, including H1N1 swine flu, diabetes, the common cold, headache, fever, stress, upset stomach, earache, and more. It has also been used as a mosquito repellent and topically on the skin to treat ringworm. Studies have shown that holy basil is beneficial for conditions including arthritis, diabetes, inflammation, diarrhea, cough, and as an antimicrobial. Tamarind is a hardwood tree that is native to Africa but also grows in India, Pakistan, and many other tropical regions. The tree produces bean-like pods filled with seeds surrounded by a fibrous pulp. As it ripens, the juicy pulp becomes paste-like and more sour than sweet. Tamarind has been used in both traditional and modern medicine. In beverage form, it's been used to treat diarrhea, constipation, fever, and peptic ulcers. The bark and leaves are also used to promote wound healing. The polyphenols in tamarind are now recognized to have strong antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. These can protect against diseases such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. The seed extract may also help lower blood sugar, while the pulp extract may help you lose body weight and reverse fatty liver disease. Tamarind has also been shown to increase the urinary excretion of fluoride. 10 grams of tamarind taken for 18 consecutive days were found to increase excretion of fluoride by over 1 milligram per day compared to a control diet. This effect was associated with decreased excretion of magnesium and zinc. Excretion of calcium and phosphorus were unchanged. On the left, we see the tamarind tree and its fruit. Here are two products that I use personally for daily intake of tamarind. The canned paste is sour, while the liquid concentrate has a sweet flavor. Most recently, I'm taking a half teaspoon of the canned paste on a daily basis. Boron is a mineral that is simply an activator. Boron is one of the main minerals used in the bone building process, and adequate boron levels are effective in preventing osteoporosis. Boron is essential in maintaining the correct levels of calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus in the body. Boron helps to regulate hormones, especially estrogen and testosterone. Boron helps to convert vitamin D into an active state, which activates estrogen, which then improves absorption of calcium. In the setting of osteoporosis, boron plays a major role in helping the body to replace lost calcium. Boron also assists in preventing arthritis and tooth decay. Boron is one of the minerals necessary for building and repairing joint cartilage. Boron deficiency causes the parathyroid to become overactive, releasing too much parathyroid hormone. Excess parathyroid hormone raises the blood level of calcium by releasing calcium from the bones, joints, and teeth into the bloodstream. High blood levels of calcium leads to calcification of soft tissues, causing muscle contractions and stiffness, calcification of the eyes and endocrine glands, especially the ovaries and pineal gland. Boron deficiency promotes hypercalcemia, contributing to excess calcification within the pineal gland. Boron is also used to remove accumulated fluoride and heavy metals from the body. Boron reacts with fluoride ions to form boron fluorides, which are then excreted in the urine. By doing so, boron also helps maintain brain function and memory capabilities. Boron is an element naturally found in green leafy vegetables like kale and spinach. It can also be found in grains, prunes, raisins, non-citrus fruits, and nuts. A balanced daily diet typically contains 1.5 to 3 milligrams of boron, which assumes that soil content is adequate, which is proving to be problematic. The 5 most common sources of boron in a person's daily diet are apples, coffee, dried beans, milk, and potatoes. Since ionic boron does not build up in the body, it never reaches toxic levels. A recommended daily allowance is usually 3 milligrams per day. It seems safe to take larger amounts if you're addressing a particular condition. I presently supplement with 3 to 6 milligrams of boron daily as part of my pineal health regimen. Fluoride from toothpaste is another source of exposure to fluoride. If you are using conventional toothpaste with fluoride, it's important to use as little as possible, making a point of not swallowing any of it, and then rinse your mouth thoroughly. It's also important not to offer children any candy-flavored toothpaste which encourages them to swallow. I was certainly guilty of this as a child. Again, the warning on toothpaste boxes advises you to call poison control even if one serving of toothpaste is swallowed. The FDA understands the toxicity of fluoride and is warning you. Most grocery stores carry fluoride-free toothpaste as is shown here. This is a great option for reducing exposure to fluoride.
We need to emphasize the importance of a carefully curated sleep-wake cycle. This is so important for activation of your pineal gland and for maintenance of pineal health. Always maintain an attitude of appreciation for the opportunity to grow and improve with positive expectation and determination to truly experience the higher functions of your pineal gland. This is your birthright. We can express the same determination as Jacob to his angel wrestling partner at Pineal. I will not let you go unless you bless me. First, a reminder to clean up your diet. We don't want any unnecessary chemicals in our systems interfering with sleep. No pesticides, no GMOs, no sugar, caffeine, tobacco, or alcohol. Also, make a point of separating from electronics. Don't watch TV. Television is called programming for a reason. TV tells lies to your vision. Minimize exposure to cell phones, computer, and Wi-Fi. Such devices emit extra low frequency or ELF radiation, and we don't understand the biological consequences of this exposure. And next, be sure to sleep in complete darkness. Even small flashes of light can interrupt the melatonin cycle. Block all window light, smoke alarm light, and avoid LCD screens before sleep and throughout the night if you happen to wake up. Invest in a dedicated set of glasses that block blue light. Sun gazing in early morning is the best way to turn off melatonin. If you don't have access to sun exposure, red light therapy can be very helpful in this regard. Not all light is created equal, and some lights are a lot better than others for sleep. Most of our electronic devices have screens that emanate large amounts of blue light. Blue light shuts off melatonin, and when you're looking at a TV, phone, or laptop for hours before bed, the blue light signals your body that it's time to be wide awake. Then when you jump into bed, it's difficult for your body to actually fall asleep, even if you're tired. Studies show that 1 hour of blue light exposure right before bed can delay melatonin secretion by up to 4 hours. A solution to this is blue light blocking glasses. These should be worn 90 minutes before bed and may allow us to continue using electronic devices or watching TV. Overall, this reduces insomnia and certain types of sleep disorders. We suffer less digital eye strain and computer vision syndrome. We wake up more refreshed and energized. Switching to natural red light in the evenings can help your body ease into sleep more naturally. Red light is ideal for evenings because it has a low color temperature far lower than regular sunlight. Unlike blue light, you can be immersed in red light at night without altering your internal clock. If you're in red light before bed, you'll produce even more melatonin, and this will help you fall asleep faster and improve sleep quality. Not just any red light will do. Red light in the 660 nanometer range and near infrared light in the 850 nanometer range is best. These two wavelengths come with an enormous list of benefits. In addition to increased melatonin and improved sleep, red light therapy has been shown to improve energy, increase mental clarity, and allow for deep relaxation. Red light therapy also stimulates collagen production and restores muscle function while promoting wound healing and reducing scar formation. Red light therapy promotes metabolism, which helps maintain normal weight and is effective in reducing pain. Altering cellular function using low-level, non-thermal LED light is called photobiomodulation, or PBM, or low-level light therapy, LLT, and is a medical treatment modality of increasing clinical importance. Light in the spectral range of 600 to 1300 nanometers achieves a high degree of skin penetration and absorption by respiratory chain components in mitochondria for increased cellular energy production. Eye protection is not required. However, the lights are very bright and may be uncomfortable for some individuals with sensitivities to light. Notably, red light therapy does not expose you to damaging UV rays, and you will not get a suntan from red light therapy.
We discussed techniques to increase the movement of CSF within the blood-brain barrier using breathing techniques that are coordinated with contraction of our core muscles. This is facilitated by flexing the sutures or joints between bony plates within the skull and rhythmic flexing of the sacral bones. The result is movement of charged particles along the spine, creating electric current with an associated electromagnetic field that surrounds us. This assists in the movement of stored energy from the body to the brain with activation of higher energy centers, including the pineal and pituitary glands. Let's make a final point that is related to structured breathing and contraction of core muscles. Stretching exercises with the contraction of our core musculature, such as by maintaining yoga-type poses, is another way to promote the movement of CSF while stimulating energy flow along our fascial planes. The effect is similar to structured breathing and will make structured breathing more effective. If you are able, performing inversions, which are variations on the headstand, is perhaps the most effective way to increase blood flow to the pineal gland. This presentation is dedicated to my patients. Above and beyond the specifics of their medical issues, they seek a better experience of personal energy above all else. It is my privilege to respond to the needs of my patients and my fiduciary responsibility to provide the best possible care. This is the larger context of health, the bigger picture we don't have time to address during individual office visits. I trust that this has been helpful and wish you success in attaining your most energetic self. Please follow James Kneller, MD, across social media platforms for more great content. Your feedback is so important, and I love to hear your stories of massive success.